I'm what you call a collector of bootleg Pokemon games. Pokemon Diamond and Jade, Chaos Black, etc. It's amazing the frequency with which you can find them at pawn shops, Goodwill, flea markets, and such. They're generally fun, even if they are unplayable, which they often are. The mistranslations and poor quality make them unintentionally humorous. I've been able to find most of the ones I've played online, but there's one that I haven't seen any mention of. I bought it at a flea market about 5 years ago. Here's a picture of the cartridge, in case anyone recognizes it, Unfortunately, when I moved 2 years ago, I lost the game, so I can't provide you with screen caps. Sorry. The game started with the familiar Nidorino and Gengar intro, a red and blue version. However, the press start screen had been altered. Red was there, but the Pokemon did not cycle through. It also said black version under the Pokemon logo. Upon selecting New Game, the game started the Professor Oak speech, and it quickly became evident that the game was essentially Pokemon Red version. After selecting your starter, if you looked at your Pokemon, you had in addition to Bulbasaur, Charmander, or Squirtle, another Pokemon. Ghost. The Pokemon was level 1. It had the sprite of the ghost that was encountered in Lavender Town before obtaining the Sylph Scope. It had one attack. Curse. I know that there is a real move named Curse, but the attack did not exist in Generation 1, so it appears it was hacked in. Defending Pokemon were unable to attack Ghost. It would only say that they were too scared to move. When the move Curse was used in battle, the screen would cut to black. The cry of the defending Pokemon would be heard, but it was distorted, played at a much lower pitch than normal. The battle screen would then reappear, and the defending Pokemon would be gone. If used in a battle against a trainer, when the Pokeballs representing their Pokemon would appear in the corner, they would have one fewer Pokeball. The implication was that the Pokemon died. What's even stranger is that after defeating a trainer and seeing Red receive $200 for winning, the battle commands would appear again. If you select Run, the battle would end as it normally does, but you could also select Curse. If you did, upon returning to the overworld, the trainer's sprite would be gone. After leaving and re-entering the area, the spot where the trainer had been would be replaced with a tombstone, like the ones at Lavender Town. The move Curse was not usable in all instances. It would fail against Ghost-type Pokemon. It would also fail when used against trainers that you would have to face again, such as your rival, or Giovanni. It was usable in your final battle against them, however. I figured this was the gimmick of the game, allowing you to use the previously uncaptured ghosts, and because Curse made the game so easy, I essentially used it throughout the whole adventure. The game changed quite a bit after defeating the Elite Four. After viewing the Hall of Fame, which consisted of Ghost and a couple of very underleveled Pokemon, the screen cut to black. A box appeared with the words, "Many years later." Then it cut to Lavender Town. An old man was standing, looking at a tombstone. You then realized this man was your character. The man moved at only half of your normal walking speed. You no longer had any Pokemon with you, not even Ghost, who, up to this point, had been impossible to remove from your party through depositing in the PC. The overworld was essentially empty. There were no people at all. There were still the tombstones of the trainers that you had used Curse on, however. You could go pretty much anywhere in the overworld at this point, though your movement was limited by the fact that you had no Pokemon to use HMs. And regardless of where you went, the music of Lavender Town continued to play on an infinite loop. After wandering for a while, I found that if you go through Diglett's cave, one of the cuttable bushes that normally blocks the path on the other side is no longer there, allowing you to advance and return to Pallet Town. Upon entering your house, and going to the exact tile where you start the game, the screen would cut to black. Then, a sprite of a Caterpie appeared. It was replaced by a Weedle, then a Pidgey. I soon realized as the Pokemon progressed from Rattata to Blastoise that these were all the Pokemon I had used Curse on. After the end of my rival's team, a youngster appeared, then a bug catcher, These were the trainers I'd cursed. Throughout the sequence, the Lavender Town music was playing, but it was slowly decreasing in pitch. By the time your rival appeared on screen, it was little more than a demonic rumble. Another cut to black. A few moments later, the battle screen suddenly appeared. Your trainer sprite was now that of an old man, and the same one who teaches you how to catch Pokemon in Viridian City. Ghost appeared on the other side, along with the words, "Ghost wants to fight." You can't use items. You had no Pokemon. If you tried to run, you couldn't escape. The only option was fight. Using fight would immediately cause you to use struggle, which didn't affect the ghost, but did chip off a bit of your own HP. When it was the ghost's turn to attack, it would simply say... ... Eventually, when your HP reached a critical point, Ghost would finally use Curse. The screen cut to black, a final time. Regardless of what button you pressed, you were permanently stuck in this black screen. At this point, the only thing you could do was turn the Game Boy off. When you played again, New Game was the only option. The game had erased the file. I played through this hack game many times, and every time the game ended with this sequence. Several times I didn't use Ghost at all, but he was impossible to remove from the party. In these cases, it did not show any Pokemon or trainers and simply cut to the climactic battle with Ghost. I'm not sure what the motives are behind the creator of this hack. It wasn't widely distributed, so it was presumably not for monetary gain. It was very well done for a bootleg. It seems he was trying to convey a message. Though, it seems I'm the sole receiver of this message. I'm not entirely sure what it was. The inevitability of death? The pointlessness of it all? Perhaps he was simply trying to morbidly inject death and darkness into a children's game. Regardless, this children's game has made me think. And it's made me cry. I went camping about 3 weekends ago in the Huntsville National Forest in Texas. Me and 3 friends that came home for the weekend. They're all in college, and usually we all get together at least once a year. Old friends from high school. For the camping trip, we plan to go backpacking deep in the forest. Live off the fish that we catch and animals that we trap, that kind of thing. We've been doing this for a while in Texas, and in numerous places. Arizona, Colorado, if anyone is familiar with the Spanish Peaks there. New Mexico, so we're pretty much used to anything that you'd encounter out there. It was my turn to pick where we went camping, so I chose Huntsville. More accurately, it's Huntsville, New Waverly. So we drove up there, parked our cars in a camping spot, and started walking off into the forest. We had some laughs along the way, everyone catching up with each other's lives. We walked until it started to get dark and set up camp where we stopped. Everyone gathered wood to make a fire, and we set up our tent. We do what we always do. Try and scare each other with weird stories. Around this time, we started to smell something very faint. It was noticeable, but not overbearing. We couldn't put our finger on what it was, so we just carried on. Mike had to go piss, and we walked off in the forest. A second later, he came running back, piss all over down his jeans like he missed really bad. Immediately, we all cracked up and threw some jokes at him. Then we noticed that he was white as snow and trying to catch his breath. He starts screaming at us to follow him and runs off. We all get serious and go follow him, not knowing what the problem was. We start to hear a faint scream and crying in the distance, in the direction that we're running. It was pitch black away from camp, and Mike had the only flashlight. We left ours at the camp. He had his from his trip taking a piss, so at this stage we didn't have much choice but to follow the light, which was frantically pointing here and there in front of him. The scream gets closer, and Mike starts to slow down. We then notice a ratty old cabin that looked like it was abandoned, except for a faint light we can see from one of the old mildew-covered windows. The crying was intense. Whoever it was couldn't breathe enough to let out a full yell. We all followed Mike up to the front door, and we could all hear the crying from inside. As soon as he knocked on the door, it stopped. We all waited and heard really heavy footsteps walking fast to the door. There was a giant slam against the door, and the sound of a bolt unlocking. Then nothing. We waited for a bit. Knocked a few more times. But still nothing. We walked around the house. There was no fucking way any of us were leaving each other's side. And noticed a window, which was a good way out. Alex took a deep breath and asked one of us to give him a boost so that he could see inside. Me and Mike lifted him up to the window. We watched him brush away dirt and webs from the window and place his face close to the window to try and see something. It was a quick beat. Then suddenly he breathed in fast and let out a loud scream. Then he fell back from the window, screaming bloody murder the whole way. We all tried to calm him down, but he was hysterical. We went to him, but he started to shake, punch, kick, you name it, and then took off towards the camp. None of us wanted to be separated, so we all ran close behind him. We caught up to him and grabbed him and set him down. The fire was dying out, so I grabbed some nearby wood that we were collecting and added it to the fire. My hands were shaking. I had to do something. I went back to Alex. We all tried to calm him down. He wouldn't. He just kept screaming, and he was breathing so hard that eventually he fainted. All of us are terrified now. We all kept the fire high until sunrise. Periodically, Alex kept waking up, screaming just like before. But sunrise, he was up and looked catatonic, just mumbling to himself and whimpering. Me and Mike decided to go look at the cabin now that it was daylight. We searched where we thought it was, except there was nothing there. Nothing at all. The indistinct smell from last night had now grown into a very strong smell of something dead. Something stale. We headed back to the campsite. When we got there, we found Alex had chewed into the side of his face and swallowed so much blood that he was throwing up. John was at his back, and he looked like he was about to die from exhaustion. I guess we all looked that way. I just didn't notice until I saw his face. Alex said quietly that we need to leave now. We all started to pack up the tent. It started to rain really heavily. It was about noon. And the sky started to grow really dark. Alex started to go into a panic. He went and grabbed a big stick and yelled at us to leave it, and leave now or he'd knock us out and drag us out of here himself. Mike started to yell at him, and they started to fight. We broke it up and finished packing, and then started to make our way back. After a little while, we arrived at the creek that we had to cross the previous day. Only it was flooded over, and the water was moving too fast for us to cross. Alex started to scream again, yelling at Mike for taking his time packing up the tent when we could have gotten out of here. This went on for a while until we finally convinced Alex to calm down and tell us what happened. He said as soon as he put his face to the glass, a face on the other side did the same thing, and started to smile, really big. It had dark eyes, and a dark mouth, which was much bigger than Alex's. As the smile got as large as it could, a giant shadow behind it swung something down and sliced its face off. The face was stuck to the window. And he said it started to laugh quietly as it slid down. Mike, still pissed off, and though he wouldn't admit it, beginning to get really freaked out, started to argue with him again. We eventually started to follow the creek for a way to cross. We then started to see toys floating in the creek. Really old toys, old Barbie dolls and baby dolls. These weren't like any old trash floating in the creek, though. This was a lot of Barbies, a lot of baby dolls. One washed towards the side and Mike picked it up. It had some kind of voice chip that was dying. It started to say some gargled words that we couldn't understand, followed by its sad excuse for laughter. Then it sounded like it was whispering. We thought the batteries must be dying, and we threw it down. We kept going and the sun was setting. Alex was freaking out more now, and was whimpering and breathing heavily. We all started to see shadows move just beyond the trees, something we all called BS, until we all were seeing it. It was barely light out now, and we stop when we see the cabin right in front of us. None of us knows what to think. Mike says, "This is bull, I'm going in there." Alex tries to stop him. We all do. All of us just wanted to go home. Mike says to all of us to fuck off and do our own thing. He doesn't care anymore. This is all bull. We start to hear hundreds of the same sort of baby doll as before, laughing, whispering, trying to sing. We start to move forward past the cabin, all of us, and keep pushing forward. We smelled something dead in the air. Something stale. The same something as before. We started to hear something crying. Something screaming. We kept on going. We eventually crossed the creek and left the woods. We get back to our vehicle and get in. It's pitch black. We drive. We're about to get on the 45 to Houston, but the road is under construction. Can't be accessed. It points to a detour. As we head towards the detour, it seems to be small, a bumpy dirt road going into the woods. We then see a young girl come up to us. She looks like she was in trouble, young, pretty. She approaches the passenger side door. She looks like she's really drugged up or beaten up. Alex doesn't roll down the window, nor does he open the door. She reaches for the handle and he immediately locks it. She puts her face on the window and starts to smile really big. We floor it. Alex starts to cry and scream, and we're all breathing heavily. We finally cut onto the street and takes us to the 45, and we take it the whole way. When we get back to my apartment, everyone doesn't know what to say. We all break apart and go to our separate ways. Mike messages me later and says that he's going to go back. I try to convince him not to, and all he does is say that it was our own minds, that it was screwing with us. I think he just wants to prove to himself that he wasn't scared. I can smell that stench everywhere now. I don't go out anymore. I just stay in and don't answer the phone. Last week, everyone I met was acting really strange. People that I knew for a long time and total strangers. My own dad. When I went to his place to eat supper with him, he just watched me. Strangely, when I was sitting down. He didn't say a word the whole time. I kept asking him what's wrong. He just slowly shook his head. When I was leaving to go home, I turned to wave, and he had black eyes and an open mouth like he was in pain. When I started to walk back, he shut the door and bolted it. I stayed there knocking and knocking. Nothing. I called him, and his phone was disconnected. I even called the police. Halfway through the questions they were asking me, the connection started to fade to static. I could hear a faint mumbling, singing, and laughing. Mike has completely vanished. There's not even a record of him being alive. When I call Alex's house, they talk to me like I'm some salesman. They say they don't know any Alex, and to please stop calling. The person who tells me that is Alex's mother. I can't get a hold of John. Someone knocked on my door, and I went to look. I saw a face completely covering the peephole, and a giant smile started to form. I called the cops again. Instead of it turning into static, they just got really strange. Sir, are you affected by any drugs at the moment? No. Are you coming home anytime soon? Excuse me? Come home. And the phone call ended. My mail slot swings every now and then. Someone is sliding pieces of baby dolls through it. I try to call people now, and all I can hear is static, and bad baby doll noises, and this crying and screaming. And my TV is busted, but when I go to piss, I can hear it on. I might be going insane. Whoever lives above me started to scream in pain and cry deeply recently. I hear giant footsteps from their apartment. I hear bangs and something falling to the ground. From the neighbors to the right of my apartment, I hear what sounds like a baby that never gets tended to. And then it sounds like a baby doll whose batteries are dying. My phone has been ringing now, and it's Alex telling me things in a language that I have never heard before. No one could even manage to repeat. I kept getting emails of pictures of black and small colorations. Now I can't even access my emails. Someone knocks on the door. then slams against it. I hear the bolts unlocking one by one, and I run to make sure to lock all of them back. And then I sit down, and I begin to cry.
You know how Fox has a weird way of counting Simpsons episodes? They refuse to count a couple of them, making the amount of episodes inconsistent. The reason for this is a lost episode from Season 1. Finding details about this missing episode is difficult. No one who's worked on the show at the time likes to talk about it. From what's been pieced together, the lost episode was written entirely by Matt Groening, and during production of the first season, Matt started to act strangely. He was very quiet, seemed very nervous and morbid. Mentioning this to anyone who was present results in them getting very angry and forbidding you to ever mention it to Matt. I first heard of it at an event where David Silverman was speaking. Someone in the crowd asked about the episode, and Silverman simply left the stage, ending the presentation hours early. The episode's production number was 7G06. The title was Dead Bart. The episode labeled 7G06 Moaning Lisa was made later and given Dead Bart's production code to hide the latter's existence. In addition to getting angry, asking anyone who was on the show about this will cause them to do everything they can to stop you from directly communicating with Matt Groening. At a fan event, I managed to follow him after he spoke to the crowd, and eventually had a chance to talk to him alone before he was leaving the building. He didn't seem upset that I'd followed him, probably expected a typical encounter with an obsessive fan. When I mentioned the lost episode, though, all color drained from his face, and he started trembling. When I asked him if he could tell me any details, he sounded like he was on the verge of tears. He grabbed a piece of paper, wrote something on it, and handed it to me. He begged me never to mention the episode again. The piece of paper had a web address on it. I'd rather not say what it was, for reasons you'll see in a second. I entered the address into my browser, and came to a site that was completely black, except for a line of yellow text, a download link. I clicked on it, and a file started downloading. Once the file was downloaded, my computer went crazy. It was the worst virus I'd ever seen. System Restore didn't work, and the entire computer had to be rebooted. Before doing this, though, I copied the file onto a CD. I tried to open it on my now empty computer, and as I suspected, there was an episode of The Simpsons on it. The episode started off like any other episode, but had very poor quality animation. If you've ever seen the original animation for Some Enchanted Evening, it was similar but less stable. The first act was fairly normal, but the way the characters acted was a little off. Homer seemed angrier, Marge seemed depressed, Lisa seemed anxious. Bart seemed to have genuine anger and hatred for his parents. The episode was about the Simpsons going on a plane trip. Near the end of the first act, the plane was taking off. Bart was fooling around, as you'd expect. However, as the plane was about 50 feet off the ground, Bart broke a window on the plane and was sucked out. Now, at the beginning of the series, Matt had an idea that the animation style of the Simpsons world represented life, and that death turned things more realistic. This was used in this episode. The picture of Bart's corpse was barely recognizable. They took full advantage of it not having to move, and made an almost photorealistic drawing of his dead body. Act 1 ended with a shot of Bart's corpse. When Act 2 started, Marge, Homer, and Lisa were sitting at their table crying. The crying went on, and it got more pained and sounded more realistic. Better acting than you would possibly think. The animation started to decay even more as they cried, and you could hear murmuring in the background. The characters could barely be made out. They were stretching and blurring. They looked like deformed shadows with random bright colors thrown on them. There were faces looking in the window, flashing in and out so you could never be sure what they looked like. This crying went on for all of Act 2. Act 3 opened with a title card saying 1 year has passed. Homer, Marge, and Lisa were skeletally thin, and still sitting at the table. There's no sign of Maggie or the pets. They decided to visit Bart's grave. Springfield was completely deserted, and as they walked through the cemetery, the houses became more and more decrepit. They all looked abandoned, and when they got to the grave, Bart's body was just laying in front of the tombstone, looking just as it did at the end of Act 1. The family started to cry again. Eventually they stopped, and they just stared at Bart's body. The camera zoomed in on Homer's face. According to the summaries, Homer tells a joke at this point, but it isn't audible in the version I saw. You can't tell what Homer's saying. The view zoomed out as the episode came to a close. The tombstones in the background had the names of every Simpsons guest star on them. Some that no one had heard of in 1989, some that hadn't been in the show yet. All of them had death dates on them. For guests who died since, like Michael Jackson and George Harrison, the dates were when they would die. The credits were completely silent and seemed handwritten, and the final images were the Simpson family on their couch, like in the intros, but all drawn in hyper-realistic, lifeless style of Bart's corpse. A thought occurred to me after seeing the episode for the first time. You could try to use the tombstones to predict the deaths of living Simpsons guest stars, but there's something odd about most of the ones who haven't died yet. All of their deaths are listed as the same date.
Peter Terry was addicted to heroin. We were friends in college and continued to be after I graduated. Notice that I said I, as he dropped out after 2 years of barely cutting it. After I moved out of the dorms and into a small apartment, I didn't see Peter as much. We would talk online every now and then. AIM was king in pre-Facebook years. And there was a period where he wasn't online for about 5 weeks straight. I wasn't worried. He was a pretty notorious flake and a drug addict, so I assumed that he just stopped caring. And then one night, I saw him log on. And before I could initiate a conversation, he sent me a message. "David, man, we need to talk." And that's when he told me about the No-End House. It got that name because no one had ever reached the final exit. The rules were pretty simple and cliché. Reach the final room of the building and you win $500. There were 9 rooms in all. The house was located outside the city, roughly 4 miles from my house. Apparently, Peter had tried and failed. He was a heroin and who knows what the fuck addict, so I figured that the drugs got the best of him, and he wigged out at a paper ghost or something. He told me it would be too much for anyone, that it was unnatural. I didn't believe him. I told him I would check it out the next night, and no matter how hard he tried to convince me otherwise, $500 sounded too good to be true. I had to go. I set out the following night. When I arrived, I immediately noticed something strange about the building. Have you ever seen or read something that shouldn't be scary, but for some reason, a chill crawls up your spine? I walked towards the building, and the feeling of uneasiness only intensified as I opened the front door. My heart slowed, and I let a relieved sigh leave me as I entered. The room looked like a normal hotel lobby decorated for Halloween. A sign was posted in place of a worker. It read, "Room 1, this way. 8 more follow. Reach the end and you win." I chuckled and made my way to the first door. The first area was almost laughable. The decor resembled the Halloween aisle of a Kmart, complete with sheet ghosts and animatronic zombies that gave a static growl when you passed by. At the far end was an exit. It was the only door besides the one I entered through. I brushed through the fake spider webs and headed for the second room. I was greeted by fog as I opened the door to the next room. The room definitely upped the ante in terms of technology. Not only was there a fog machine, but a bat hung from the ceiling and flew in circles. Scary. They seemed to have a Halloween soundtrack that one would find in the 99-cent store on loop somewhere in the room. I didn't see a stereo, but I guess they must have used a PA system. I stepped over a few toy rats that wheeled around and walked with a puffed chest across to the next area. I reached for the doorknob. And my heart sank to my knees. I did not want to open that door. A feeling of dread hit me so hard that I could barely even think. Logic overtook me after a few terrified moments, and I shook it off and entered the next room. Room 3 is when things began to change. On the surface, it looked like a normal room. There was a chair in the middle of the wooden paneled floor. A single lamp in the corner did a poor job of lighting the area, casting a few shadows across the floor and walls. That was the problem. Shadows. Plural. With the exception of the chairs, there were others. I had barely walked in the door, and I was already terrified. It was at that moment that I knew something wasn't right. I didn't even think as I automatically tried to open the door that I came through. It was locked from the other side. That set me off. Was something locking the doors as I progressed? There was no way. I would have heard them. Was it a mechanical lock that's set automatically? Maybe. But I was too scared to really think. I turned back to the room, and the shadows were gone. The chair's shadow remained, but the others were gone. I slowly began to walk. I used to hallucinate when I was a kid, so I wrote off the shadows as a figment of my imagination. I began to feel better as I made it to the halfway point of the room. I looked down as I took my steps. And that's when I saw it. Or didn't see it. My shadow wasn't there. I didn't have time to scream. I ran as fast as I could to the other door and flung myself without thinking into the room beyond. The fourth room was possibly the most disturbing. As I closed the door, all light seemed to be sucked out and put back into the previous room. I stood there, surrounded by darkness, not able to move. I'm not afraid of the dark and never have been, but I was absolutely terrified. All sight had left me. I held my hand in front of my face, and if I didn't know what I was doing, I would never have been able to tell. Darkness doesn't describe it. I couldn't hear anything. It was dead silence. When you're in a soundproof room, you can still hear yourself breathing. You can hear yourself being alive. I couldn't. I began to stumble forward after a few moments, my rapid, beating heart the only thing that I could feel. There was no door in sight. I wasn't even sure there was one this time. The silence was then broken by a low hum. I felt something behind me. I spun around wildly, but could barely even see my nose. I knew it was there, though. Regardless of how dark it was, I knew something was there. The hum grew louder. Closer. It seemed to surround me, but I knew whatever was causing the noise was in front of me, inching closer. I took a step back. I had never felt that kind of fear. I can't really describe true fear. I wasn't even scared I was going to die. I was scared of what the alternative was. I was afraid of what the thing had in store for me. Then the lights flashed for a second and I saw it. Nothing. I saw nothing, and I know I saw nothing there. The room was again plunged into darkness, and the hum became a wild screech. I screamed in protest. I couldn't hear the goddamn sound for another minute. I ran backwards away from the noise and fumbled for the door handle. I turned and fell into room 5. Before I describe room 5,
You have to understand something. I am not a drug addict. I've had no history of drug abuse or any sort of psychosis short of the childhood hallucinations that I mentioned earlier, and those were only when I was really tired or just waking up. I entered the no-end house with a clear head. After falling in from the previous room, my view from room 5 was from my back looking up at the ceiling. What I saw didn't scare me. It simply surprised me. Trees had grown into the room and towered above my head. The ceilings in this room were taller than the others, which made me think that I was in the center of the house. I got up off the floor, dusted myself off, and took a look around. It was definitely the biggest room of them all. I couldn't even see the door from where I was. Various brush and trees must have blocked my line of sight with the exit. Up to this point, I figured the rooms were going to get scarier, but this was a paradise compared to the last room. I also assumed whatever was in room 4 stayed back there. I was incredibly wrong. As I made my way deeper into the room, I began to hear what one would hear if they were in a forest. Chirping bugs and the occasional flap of birds seemed to be my only company in this room. That was the thing that bothered me the most. I heard the bugs and other animals, but I didn't see any of them. I began to wonder how big this house was. From the outside, when I first walked up to it, it looked like a regular house. It was definitely on the bigger side, but this was almost a full forest in here. The canopy covered my view of the ceiling, but I assumed it was still there, however high it was. I couldn't see any walls either. The only way I knew I was still inside was that the floor matched the other rooms, the standard dark wood paneling. I kept walking, hoping that the next tree I passed would reveal the door. After a few moments of walking, I felt a mosquito fly onto my arm. I shook it off. A second later, I felt about 10 more land on my skin at different places. I felt them crawl up and down my arms and legs, and a few made their way across my face. I flailed wildly to get them all off, but they just kept crawling. I looked down and let out a muffled scream. No, more of a whimper, to be honest. I didn't see a single bug. Not one bug was on me, but I could feel them crawl. I heard them fly by my face and sting my skin, but I couldn't see a single one. I dropped to the ground and began to roll wildly. I was desperate. I hated bugs, especially ones I couldn't see or touch, but these bugs could touch me, and they were everywhere. I began to crawl. I had no idea where I was going. The entrance was nowhere in sight, and I still hadn't even seen the exit, so I just crawled, my skin wriggling with the presence of those phantom bugs. After what seemed like hours, I felt the door. I grabbed the nearest tree and propped myself up, mindlessly slapping my arms and legs to no avail. I tried to run, but I couldn't. My body was exhausted from crawling and dealing with whatever it was that was on me. I took a few shaky steps to the door, grabbing each tree on the way for support. It was only a few feet away when I heard it. The low hum from before. It was coming from the next room, and it was deeper. I could almost feel it inside of my body, like when you stand next to an amp at a concert. The feeling of the bugs on me lessened as the hum grew louder. As I placed my hand on the doorknob, the bugs were completely gone. But I couldn't bring myself to turn the knob. I knew that if I let go, the bugs would return, and there was no way I would make it back to room 4. I just stood there, my head pressed against the door marked 6, and my hand shakily grasping the knob. The hum was so loud I couldn't even hear myself pretend to think. There was nothing I could do but move on. Room 6 was next. And room 6 was hell. I closed the door behind me. My eyes held shut and my ears ringing. The hum was surrounding me. As the door clicked into place, the hum was gone. I opened my eyes in surprise, and the door that I had shut was gone. It was just a wall now. I looked around in shock. The room was identical to room 3. Same chair and lamp, but with correct amount of shadows this time. The only real difference was that there was no exit door, and the one I came through was gone. As I said before, I had no previous issues in terms of mental instability, but at that moment, I fell into what I now know was insanity. I didn't scream. I didn't make a sound. At first, I scratched, softly. The walls were tough, but I knew the door was there somewhere. I just knew it was. I scratched at where the doorknob was. I clawed at the wall frantically with both hands. My nails were filed down to the skin against the wood. I fell silently to my knees, the only sound in the room, the incessant scratching against the wall. I knew it was there. The door was there. I knew it was there. I knew if I could just get past this wall. "Are you all right?" I jumped off the ground and spun in one motion. I leaned against the wall behind me, and I saw what it was that spoke to me. To this day, I regret ever turning around. There was a little girl. She was wearing a soft white dress that went down to her ankles. She had long blonde hair to the middle of her back, and white skin and blue eyes. She was the most frightening thing I had ever seen, and I know that nothing in my life will ever be as unnerving as what I saw in her. While looking at her, I saw something else. Where she stood, I saw what looked like a man's body, only larger than normal, and covered in hair. He was naked from head to toe, but his head was not human, and his toes were hoofs. It wasn't the devil. But at that moment, it might as well have been. The form had the head of a ram and the snout of a wolf. It was horrifying, and it was synonymous with the little girl in front of me. They were the same form. I can't really describe it, but I saw them at the same time. They shared the same spot in the room, but it was like looking at two separate dimensions. When I saw the girl, I saw the form. When I saw the form, I saw the girl. I couldn't speak. I could barely even see. My mind was revolting against what it was attempting to process. I had been scared before in my life. I had never been more scared than when I was trapped in the 4th room, but that was before room 6. I just stood there staring at whatever it was that spoke to me. There was no exit. I was trapped here with it. And then it spoke again. "David, you should have listened." When it spoke, I heard the words of the little girl, but the other form spoke through my mind in a voice I won't attempt to describe. There was no other sound. The voice just kept repeating the sentence over and over and over again in my head, and I agreed. I didn't know what to do. I was slipping into madness, yet couldn't take my eyes off of what was in front of me. I dropped to the floor. I thought that I had passed out, but the room wouldn't let me. I just wanted it to end. I was on my side. my eyes wide open, and the form staring down at me, scurrying across the floor in front of me, was one of the battery-powered rats from the second room. The house was toying with me. But for some reason, seeing that rat pulled my mind back from whatever depths it was headed. And I looked around the room. I was getting out of there. I was determined to get out of that house and live and never think about this place again. I knew this room was hell, and I wasn't ready to take up residency. At first, it was just my eyes that moved. I searched the walls for any kind of opening. The room wasn't that big, so it didn't take long to soak up the entire layout. The demon still taunted me, the voice growing louder as the form stayed rooted where it stood. I placed my hand on the floor, lifted myself up to all fours, and turned to scan the wall behind me. Then I saw something I couldn't believe. The form was now right at my back, whispering into my mind how I shouldn't have come. I felt its breath on the back of my neck, but I refused to turn around. A large rectangle was scratched into the wood, with a small dent chipped away in the center of it. Right in front of my eyes, I saw the large 7 I had mindlessly etched into the wall. I knew what it was. Room 7 was just beyond that wall where Room 5 was moments ago. I don't know how I'd done it. Maybe it was just my state of mind at the time, but I had created the door. I knew I had. In my madness, I had scratched into the wall what I needed the most, an exit to the next room. Room 7 was close. I knew the demon was right behind me, but for some reason it couldn't touch me. I closed my eyes and placed both hands on the large 7 in front of me. I pushed as hard as I could. The demon was now screaming in my ear. It told me that I was never leaving. It told me that this was the end, but I wasn't going to die. I was going to live there in room 6 with it. I wasn't. I pushed and screamed at the top of my lungs. I knew I was going to push through the wall eventually. I clenched my eyes shut and screamed, and the demon was gone. I was left in silence. I turned around slowly and was greeted by the room as it was when I entered. Just a chair. And a lamp. I couldn't believe it. But I didn't have time to waste. I turned back to the 7 and jumped back slightly. What I saw was a door. And it wasn't the one that I'd scratched in, but a regular door with a large 7 on it. My whole body was shaking. It took me a while to turn the knob. I just stood there for a while, staring at the door. I couldn't stay in room 6. I couldn't. But if this was only room 6, I couldn't imagine what 7 had in store. I must have stood there for an hour, just staring at the 7. And finally, with a deep breath, I twisted the knob and opened the door to room 7. I stumbled through the door, mentally exhausted and physically weak. The door behind me closed. And I realized where I was. I was outside. Not outside like room 5, but actually outside. My eyes stung. I wanted to cry. I fell to my knees and tried, but I couldn't. I was finally out of that hell. I didn't even care about the prize that was promised. I turned and saw that the door I just went through was the entrance. I walked to my car and I drove home thinking of how nice a shower sounded. I pulled up to my house. I felt uneasy. The joy of leaving no-end house had faded. And dread was slowly building in my stomach. I shook it off as a residual from the house and made my way to the front door. I entered and immediately went up to my room. There on my bed was my cat, Baskerville. It was the first living thing that I'd seen all night, and I reached to pet him. He hissed and swiped at my hand. I recoiled in shock. He'd never acted like that. Whatever. He's an old cat, I thought. I jumped in the shower, get ready for what I was expecting to be a sleepless night. And after my shower, I went to the kitchen to make something to eat. I descended the stairs and turned to the family room. What I saw would be forever burned into my mind, however. My parents were lying on the ground, naked and covered in blood. They were mutilated to near unidentifiable states. Their limbs were removed and placed next to their bodies. Their heads were placed on their chests facing me. The most unsettling part was their expressions. They were smiling as though they were happy to see me. I vomited and sobbed there in the family room. I didn't know what had happened. They didn't even live with me at the time. I was a mess. And then I saw it. A door that was never there before. A door with a large 8 scrawled on it in blood. I was still in the house. I was standing in my family room, but I was in room 7. The faces of my parents smiled wider as I realized this. They weren't my parents, they couldn't be. But they looked exactly like them. The door marked 8 was across the room behind the mutilated bodies in front of me. I knew I had to move on, but at that moment I gave up. The smiling faces tore into my mind. They grounded me where I stood. I vomited again and nearly collapsed. Then the hum returned. It was louder than ever, and it filled the house and shook the walls. The hum compelled me to walk. I began to walk, slowly, making my way closer to the door and the bodies. I could barely stand, let alone walk. And the closer I got to my parents, the closer I came to suicide. The walls were now shaking so hard it seemed as though they were going to crumble, but still the faces smiled at me as I inched closer, their eyes following me. I was now between the 2 bodies, a few feet away from the door. The dismembered hands clawed their way across the carpet towards me. All the while the faces continued to stare. New terror washed over me, and I walked faster. I didn't want to hear them speak. I didn't want the voices to match those of my parents. They began to open their mouths, and the hands were inches from my feet. In a dash of desperation, I lunged towards the door, threw it open, and slammed it behind me. Room 8. I was done. After what I had just experienced, I knew there wasn't anything else this fucking house could throw at me that I couldn't live through. There was nothing short of fires of hell that I wasn't ready for. But unfortunately, I underestimated the abilities of a no-end house. Unfortunately, things got more disturbing, more terrifying, and more unspeakable in room 8. I still have trouble believing what I saw in room 8. Again, the room was a carbon copy of rooms 3 and 6, but sitting in the usual empty chair was a man. After a few seconds of disbelief, my mind finally accepted the fact that the man sitting in the chair was me. Not someone who looked like me. It was David Williams. I walked closer. I had to get a better look, even though I was sure of it. He looked up at me and I noticed tears in his eyes. Please. Please don't do it. Please. Please don't hurt me. What? I asked, who are you? I'm not going to hurt you. Yes, you are. He was sobbing. You're going to hurt me. And I don't want you to. He sat in the chair with his legs up and began rocking back and forth. It was actually pretty pathetic looking, especially since he was me, identical in every way. Listen, who are you? I was now only a few feet from my doppelganger. It was the weirdest experience yet. Standing there talking to myself. I wasn't scared, but I would be soon. Why are you? You're going to hurt me! You're going to hurt me! If you want to leave, you're going to hurt me. Why are you saying this? Calm down, alright? Let's just try and figure that... And then I saw it. The David sitting down was wearing the same clothes as me. Except for a small red patch on his shirt, embroidered with the number 9. You're going to hurt me! You're going to hurt me! Don't, please, you're going to hurt me! You're going to hurt me. You're going to hurt me. Please don't hurt me. Please. My eyes didn't leave that small number on his chest. I knew exactly what it was. The first few doors were plain and simple, but after a while they got a little more ambiguous. 7 was scratched into the wall. By my own hands, 8 was marked in blood above the bodies of my parents, but 9... 9. This number was on a person. A living person. Worse still, it was on a person that looked exactly like me. David? I had to ask. Yes. Yes. You're going to hurt me. You're going to hurt me. He continued to sob and rock. He answered to David. He was me, right down to the voice. But that 9... I paced around for a few minutes when he sobbed in his chair. The room had no doors, and similarly to room 6, the door I came through was gone. For some reason, I assumed that scratching would get me nowhere this time, and I studied the walls and the floor around the chair, sticking my head underneath, seeing if anything was below. Fortunately, there was. Below the chair was a knife. Attached was a tag that read, "To David, from management." The feeling in my stomach as I read that tag was something sinister. I wanted to throw up, and the last thing I wanted to do was remove the knife from under the chair. The other David was still sobbing uncontrollably. My mind was spinning into an attic of unanswerable questions. Who put this here? How did they get my name? Not to mention the fact that, as I knelt on the cold wood floor, I also sat in that chair, sobbing in protest of being hurt by myself. It was all too much to process. The house and the management had been playing with me this whole time. My thoughts, for some reason, turned to Peter and whether or not he got this far. If he did, if he met a Peter Terry sobbing in this very chair, rocking back and forth with... I shook those thoughts out of my head. They didn't matter. I took the knife from under the chair, and immediately, the other David went quiet. David, he said in my voice, what do you think you're going to do? I lifted myself from the ground and clutched the knife in my hand. I'm going to get out of here. David was still sitting in the chair, though he was very calm now. He looked up at me with a slight grin. I couldn't tell if he was going to laugh or strangle me, and slowly he got up from the chair and stood facing me. It was uncanny. His height and even the way he stood matched mine. I felt the rubber hilt of the knife in my hand and gripped it tighter. I didn't know what I was planning. I didn't know what I was planning on doing with it, but I had a feeling I was going to need it. Now, his voice was slightly deeper than my own. I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to hurt you, and I'm going to keep you here. I didn't respond. I just lunged and tackled him to the ground. I had mounted him and looked down, knife poised and ready. He looked up at me, terrified. It was like I was looking in a mirror. And then the hum returned, low and distant, though I still felt it deep in my body. David looked up at me as I looked down at myself. The hum was getting louder, and I felt something inside of me snap. With one motion, I slammed the knife into the patch on his chest and ripped it down. Blackness fell on the room. And I was falling. Darkness around me was like nothing I had experienced. Up to that point, room 4 was dark, but it didn't come close to what was completely engulfing me. I wasn't even sure that I was falling after a while. I felt weightless, covered in black. And then a deep sadness came over me. I felt lost, depressed, and suicidal. The sight of my parents entered my mind. I knew it wasn't real, but I had seen it. And the mind had trouble differentiating between what was real and what wasn't. The sadness only deepened. I was in room 9 for what seemed like days. The final room. And that's exactly what it was. The end. No end house had an end, and I had reached it. And at that moment, I gave up. I knew that I would be in that in-between state forever, accompanied by nothing but darkness. Not even the hum was there to keep me sane. I had lost all senses. I couldn't feel myself. I couldn't hear anything. Sight was completely useless here. I searched for a taste in my mouth and found nothing. I felt disembodied and completely lost. I knew where I was. This was hell. Room 9 was hell. And then it happened. A light. One of those stereotypical lights at the end of the tunnel. I felt ground come up from below me, and I was standing. For a moment or two, gathering my thoughts and senses, I slowly walked towards the light. As I approached the light, it took form. It was a vertical slit down the side of an unmarked door. I slowly walked through the door and found myself back where I started. The lobby of No End House. It was exactly how I left it, still empty, still decorated with childish Halloween decorations after everything that had happened that night. I was still wary of where I was. After a few moments of normalcy, I looked around the place, trying to find anything different. And on the desk was a plain white envelope with my name handwritten on it. Immensely curious, but still cautious, I mustered up the courage to open the envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten. David Williams. Congratulations, you've made it to the end of No End House. Please accept this prize as a token of great achievement. Yours forever. Management. And with the letter were 5 $100 bills. I couldn't stop laughing. I laughed for what seemed like hours. I laughed as I walked out to my car. And I laughed as I drove home. And I laughed as I pulled up to my driveway. And I laughed as I opened my front door to my house. And I laughed as I saw the small 10 etched into the wood.
As you may know, the popular show Ed, Edd and Eddy has been running for a long time. However, between October 7th, 2003 and October 21st, 2003, episode 34 was accidentally released 1 week before it was scheduled to. It was also known to some around the office the primary writer had been sick with the flu, and instead of going on to make episode 34, the show was supposed to replay episode 1. At 5 a.m. Eastern, people watched a very disturbing new episode, premiering on Cartoon Network. Some children were unfortunate enough to see it. Apparently, the quality of the episode was mediocre when held to regular standards. Animation was choppy, sound was constricted and very muffled. Reports of a line running up and down similar to crappy VHS tapes were received. Scenery was described as overwhelmingly dark and depressing, without changing props and other background objects. Stormy looking. Characters also behaved oddly. Instead of the normal goofy hijinks-inspired personalities, viewers complained they seemed extremely agitated, gratuitously hateful toward each other, and constantly about to begin sobbing after the lines. The protagonist also had a very bad lisp. No one knows why. But he spoke with a sexual tone, and that further bothered the viewers. I was one of those viewers. The episode began with Eddie walking down the street with Ed. I noted the third Ed was missing. There was an angular shot coming from in front of the two to show them walking toward the viewer. Eddie was wearing an angry look, as he does when something goes wrong. His eyes were red around the irises. Ed looked absolutely forlorn, and practically dragged behind Eddie, tears in his eyes, which were both lazy and looking in opposite outward directions. Kevin, the series antagonist, was riding his bike opposite the Eds, towards them. The shot became blurry, and low moans were heard coming from Eddie before Kevin hit him, which never happened because the screen went to black. The screen then snapped back, and Kevin was again headed towards Eddie. The view was so blurry this time, and all I saw was a green blob headed towards a yellow one. Again the low moan, only this time it sounded like the microphone was broken, and static came in, greedily overshadowing the moan. A claymation sequence of Double D sleeping in Eddie's bed came up. Honestly, it may have just been the abruptness, but I jumped and shivered. Waking up and getting out of bed, he moved oddly around the circular room, the fast pitter-patter of footsteps being the only audio. The step sound was very clear as I was shown a bird's-eye view of him scampering around the room. There were no visible doors. Ed began screeching. Sounded like a fisher cat, as he moved wildly around the cell of a room, faster and faster, until the screen began blurring again, the purple room's color swallowing a now orange blur. An extreme close-up of Eddie's front door sat in abrupt silence for a maddening long time. At least 2 minutes of dead silence, and a door. Next we see Jimmy and Sarah at a doctor of some sort, probably an oral doctor. Jimmy, obstructed in view by a hanging lamp, is crying loudly, and Sarah trying to comfort him in an unusual warm fashion. "It hurts, Sarah. It hurts." Suddenly, the door of the room is smashed open by a new character, a dentist. His face wasn't shown because he was tall enough to be out of the shot. Sarah was escorted out of the room, and Jimmy was shown. His headgear was mangled, the front bent upward, stretching his lips very high, tearing proportions. The front of his gums were trickling blood, and teeth were missing. The disturbing part was he had lost both arms and legs beforehand, apparently, and sat paraplegic. I almost cried as I came to the conclusion the others had beaten him up and bent his headgear. The camera stayed on his mangled face for a few seconds, still as a picture, silent as ever. Commercials came on. We were instantly assaulted with a very hairy Rolf in his darkened shed, fisting the cow repeatedly. The visual loops, and gets blurry again as the scene pans out. Naz is reading a magazine on her couch. The quality is now perfect. Eddie is now alone, without Ed. The quality declines, worse than before, and he's still walking. The sun now lightening the mood somewhat as he smiles and begins running. The door is shown again, and we see through Eddie's eyes as he reaches out and opens it. His house is nice and bright, but a very badly played violin is blaring, the only audio in the scene, as he makes his way through the house. And he opens the door to his room. Johnny is shown under Naz's couch cushions as he crawls out on all fours in a comedic way and pops up behind her, still oblivious. I laughed because someone forgot to draw his eyes and I thought of a mole. And suddenly I stopped laughing as he started swallowing her head, still in a cartoonish fashion, of course, but this was different. He and she stayed like this until she started kicking and struggling. Johnny held her like this until she went limp. A zoom in on his face revealed extremely small human eyes. Double D was lying on Eddie's floor, no longer in claymation. The camera showed Eddie's house for the remainder of the episode, about 3 minutes. And the next program began on the spot. The summer was nice and warm that year. The sun, as always, brought warmth to your skin. The light breezes that swept through the neighborhood made the days not so hot or cold. It was simply perfect weather. But one summer Sally will never forget. Sally was a young girl, 8 years old, long, curly brown hair, and bright green eyes. She was always polite, she never lied, and did as she was told. Her mother and father simply adored her. They couldn't ask for a better daughter. Sally giggled as she played with her friends outside of their home. Various games like hopscotch and jump rope, even dolls and tag. Sally's mother smiled warmly at the innocent sight and wiped her hands upon her apron, calling out, "Sally, come inside now, it's time for lunch." Sally looked up from her doll and smiled. "Okay, Mommy." Sitting down at the dinner table, Sally lightly bounced in her seat, excited for who knows what. Her mother placed down a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with the crusts cut off, some carrot and celery sticks on the side, and nice juice to drink. "Thank you, Mama." "You're welcome, sweetie." As the child began to take hold of her sandwich, her mother took a seat across from the girl and smiled, watching her eat. Guess what? Your Uncle Johnny is coming over. Sally looked up and smiled. The corners of her lips had traces of peanut butter on them. Uncle Johnny? She replied through her food. Her mother laughed and nodded. He's coming to help Daddy with his job, and to look after you, too. Maybe all of us can go to the carnival, too. Sally chewed the rest of her bite quickly and swallowed. Can Sarah and Jenny come, too? Her mother looked up and thought. Well, that's up to their mom and dads to say, but if they can, sure. Again the child giggled and bounced in her seat again, now even more excited for this year's summer vacation. Over the course of the next few days, Uncle Johnny drove up to the house. Climbing out of his car, the man stretched his arms over his head and let out a tired sigh. Uncle Johnny! A small voice chirped, earning the attention of the man. Sally dropped the jump rope she was playing with and ran over to the family member hugging him. Hey, Sal, how have you been? He asked, lifting the girl up with ease, giving her a proper hug. The girl giggled and looked back at her friends, who were now waving in their direction. I've been playing with Sarah and Jenny. Let's go inside and tell Mama you're here. Sounds like a good idea. He smiled and walked inside the house, calling out to the woman. Marie, I'm here. He called, followed by Sally mimicking him. Mama, he's here. The housewife hurried out of the kitchen and smiled to see Johnny made it. Johnny, you're here safe and sound. The man placed the girl down on the ground and gave her bottom a pat to send her off, and hugged the woman. Of course I did. Why else wouldn't I come here safe and sound? He laughed, walking into the kitchen with the woman. Sally trotted over to the front door, calling out that she was going back outside to play. Make sure you come in before dark. Yes, ma'am. And off the girls went. As dinner drew near, Sally's father came home, happy to see his brother was there as well. Walking in with his daughter, he strolled up to Johnny with a handshake and hug. Nice to see you, man. How have you been? He asked, crossing his arms, watching his wife set the table up for supper. Johnny gave a shrug of his shoulders, fiddled with his thumbs. Me and Karen split up. Oh, that's terrible. I'm sorry. Johnny shook his head with a smile. Nah, it's all right. I'm happy. I can move freely without having someone constantly wanting to know where I am and what I'm doing. The two men laughed together, and making their way to the table to eat. Marie, this is wonderful. Thank you, I'm glad you like it. It's yummy, Mama. Adults smiled and chuckled from their child's praise. Plate after plate was empty, and Sally began to yawn over and over again, rubbing her eyes with her hands. Her mother smiled and gently rubbed her back. Looks like someone's tired. Time for bed. Sally nodded and hopped off her seat, picking up her plate and carrying it over to the sink. Her mother rose up to take her to bed, but stopped from John grabbing a hold of her arm. I'll take her to bed, he smiled, earning one in return. All right, thank you, John. The man nodded, watching the woman making her way to clean dishes and put up the leftovers. Then looked to see his brother leaving for the bathroom to wash up, and followed after the young girl to her room. John smiled and closed the door behind him, watching the girl rummage around through her dresser for pajamas to wear. Do you need any help? He asked, watching the girl look up and nod. Okay, let's see what you got. The man waltzed up beside her and began looking through her various pajamas. You've got some strawberry printed ones. I bet you'll smell just like them in your dreams. He took the shirt up and showed her, giving it a few inhales. Sally giggled and shook her head, indicating she didn't want to wear her strawberry pajamas. Johnny nodded and placed the shirt back, and picked up another shirt with a unicorn on it. How about this one? I bet you'll ride on Miss Unicorn here. Again the child giggled and shook her head no. The man let out a small huff before putting it back. Then took out a regular white nightgown. How about this? Be able to turn into a princess with this. Sally's eyes lit up and clapped her hands excitedly, and nodded. Placing the gown on her bed, he reached over to her and began to unbutton her shirt. I can get dressed, Uncle, she said with a smile, looking down at his hands on her shirt. The man smiled back and nodded, continuing to work his way down her shirt. I bet you can. But you're tired, and why not have some help? He asked, watching Sally nod a few times. Once getting her shirt unbuttoned, he slipped it off her shoulders and gave her tummy a nice poke, making her giggle. He grinned, took a hold of the rim of her shorts, and pulled them down. Finally, the man grabbed the hold of her nightgown and pushed the opening over her head making sure her arms could go through the sleeves. "All done," he said happily, watching the girl smile back, giggling, when she bounded on top of her bed. Johnny rose up and picked up her clothes. The door opened up, and in walked Sally's mother, coming to tuck her in. "You ready for bed?" she asked, walking around the bed. Johnny looked up and hurried over to the other side of the bed. "I'll tuck her in. That okay?" Marie looked up at him, smiled, shaking her head. "Of course." She looked down at her daughter and leaned in, kissing the child on the forehead. "Good night, sweetheart." "Good night, Mama." Giving the girl a gentle rub with her thumb on her forehead, the woman took the clothes Johnny had and made her way out of the room. Johnny smiled to the mother and walked over to the light switch, flicking it off. He carefully closed the door to her room and locked it. Slowly he looked over his shoulder towards Sally. Johnny wore a chilling, crooked smile. After the next few days, Marie noticed that Sally wasn't acting herself. She wasn't smiling as brightly as she did. She wasn't chipper, or spoke with the same amount of happiness. Marie took a hold of the child's hand before she left to play with her friends, and took her aside. Sally looked up at her mother with a confused look. "Honey, are you feeling okay?" she asked, kneeling down to be at Sally's height. Sally stared at her idly, and slowly began to weep. Her mother widened her eyes in confusion. "Sally?" "Mama, I didn't want to," the girl managed to say through hiccup sobs. Didn't want to what, sweetie?" I didn't want to play. I didn't want to play his game." The child looked at her mother and hugged her tight. "He touched me and made me touch him." Marie frowned and gently began to stroke the child's hair, comforting her, lightly shushing her to calm her down. "Shh, it's okay. Mama's here now." It was a nightmare, that's all. The girl had a scary nightmare. "Everything is fine now, okay? Don't worry about it anymore." She watched Sally look up at her. Her breathing chopped up from her crying, and she smiled. "Okay, Mama." Her mother smiled and kissed her forehead. "Now go wash up. Don't want to play with your friends with a dirty face." Sally let out a little giggle and ran off to the bathroom to wash her face. Later that day, Johnny and his brother came back from work. Frank sighed, smiling while he saw Sally wave at him. The father waved back and closed the car door, making his way up to the house. Johnny looked at Sally as well and smiled, waving to her. The child's smile slowly wilted, showing less happiness in it, but waved back as well. Johnny also walked inside the house and paused when he heard the conversation between his brother and his wife. "Sally what?" Frank asked. "She had a nightmare, a very bad one. She said he touched her." "Well, who the hell is he?" "I don't know, Frank. But it was only a nightmare. I just wanted to inform you of what's been going on with her and why she's acting different." Johnny furrowed his brow in anger. His knuckles turned white, then calmed down quickly, thinking fast. He put on a smile and walked into the room, making it look like he just walked into their conversation, and rose his brow. Whoops, did I interrupt something?" he asked, watching the couple shake their heads. Johnny smiled again and thumbed back into the direction of the car. "I'm gonna head to the store. You need anything, Marie?" The woman smiled and looked towards the kitchen. "Yes, actually, can you get me some eggs, milk, bread, and juice?" Johnny nodded, about to leave until he paused. Sally wanted to come along too. Just wanted to inform you." Marie smiled. "Thank you, John." He nodded again and made his way out of the house, keys in hand, looking out to Sally with her friends. He cupped his hands over his mouth. "Sally!" The child looked up at him and stared. "Come on, let's go to the store." John made his way over to the car, gesturing for the girl to follow him. Sally sat there for a moment, then placed her dolls on the grass. "I'll be back. Please watch over Marzipan and Lily for me." Jenny and Sarah smiled and nodded, continuing to play their game of dolls without her. Sally reluctantly made her way around the car, climbing into the passenger seat and buckling herself in. "Did Mama want you to go to the store?" she asked. Johnny nodded and put the keys into the ignition, turning it, and backing out of the driveway. Yep. She wanted me to get some food for her. Maybe I can get you something, too. He grinned, looking down at the child. Sally nervously smiled back and looked ahead, watching the scenery pass by. As soon as they got to the road leading to the store, Sally noticed he wasn't slowing down to turn into the parking lot. She furrowed her brow, confused, and looked up at him. Uncle Johnny, the store is back that way, she said, pointing in the direction of the Whole Food store. But nothing came from the man. He just continued driving, a very faint smile on his face. The child sat up and looked past the back seat, watching the store slowly grow smaller till it was out of sight. Realizing they weren't going to the grocery store, the child watched her uncle drive into the small parking lot in the community park near town. No one went to the park on Sundays. Sally felt nervous. Her breathing quickened, watching the man with wide eyes. Johnny put the car into park and turned the ignition off, looking to the child, anger obviously showing in his features. You told your mom what happened, didn't you? He asked, watching the girl frantically shake her head no. You're not playing the game right, Sally. His tone almost had a slight singing to it. The man reached over and pulled the girl to him, ignoring the struggling she was putting up at her whimpering pleas. You said you'd play the game with me, Sally. You lied to me. Opening the car door beside him, the man climbed out along with the child and shoved her to the ground, quickly pinning her down, ignoring the cries and writhing the child was making. You have to be punished now for breaking the rules, he said in that slightly singing tone, and began to unbuckle his belt. This just in. A couple finds the body of 8-year-old Sally Williams in the community park. The week-long search is now closed. More tonight at 9. She could have sworn that she closed her door before climbing into bed. Guess I forgot. Getting up from the warmth and comfort of her bed, the teen made her way across the room to shut the door. Before she could climb back into her covers, a creak outside in the hall rose up. Were her parents up? They must have checked on her to see if she was sleeping or something. As soon as she got her legs covered up, the teen froze to hear a faint sound of crying, though it sounded like a child. Slowly rising up from bed once more, the girl made her way to the door and opened it. The crying seemed to be louder outside her room. Peering down the darkness, the teen crept down the hallway, following the sounds of the whimpering. Once getting to the end of the hall, the girl gasped. Sitting on the floor in front of the moonlit window was a little girl. She was hunched over, crying. How did she get into their house? Through the window? Swallowing hard, the teen spoke. Who are you? How did you get into my house? She asked. Suddenly the crying stopped. The child slowly moved her trembling hands away from her face and looked behind her, twitching lightly. Blood replaced her tears, staining her hands. There was a deep clot of blood and hair on the side of her head, blood leaking from the wound down her face and onto her dirty nightgown. Her bright green eyes seemed like they saw right through her soul. This is my house, the child spoke, her voice raspy, sounding as if she's struggling to speak. The girl's body twitched and wiggled oddly as she rose to her feet and turned to face the teen. Her feet were dirty, as if she was running through mud. Scrapes covered her knees and legs, and the end of her gown was torn and tattered. The name Sally sewn into the front. Reaching out with her blood-soaked hand, the girl slowly smiled, blood staining her teeth as she spoke. Play with me.
It was a nice summer day. My 5-year-old son, James, was playing outside in the backyard of our suburban home. James has always been a quiet boy. He plays by himself mostly. He never had many friends. But he's always had a wild imagination. I was in the kitchen feeding our dog Fido when I heard what sounded like James talking to someone in the backyard. I'm not sure who it could be that he was talking to. Could he have finally made a friend? Being a single dad, it's hard for me to always keep an eye on my son, so I decided to go outside and check on him. When I went out into the backyard, I was a bit confused because James was the only person back there. Was he talking to himself? I could have sworn I heard another voice. "James! It's time to come inside!" I called out to him. He came inside and sat down at the kitchen table. It was about lunchtime, so I decided to make him a turkey sandwich. "James, who are you talking to out there?" I asked. James looked up for a moment. "I was playing with my new friend," he said, smiling. I poured some milk and continued to pry, as any good father would. "Does your friend have a name? Why didn't you, ask him to have lunch with us?" I asked. James stared at me for a moment before replying. "His name is Laughing Jack." I was a bit taken aback by what he said. "Oh? That's a strange name. What does your friend look like?" I asked, a bit confused. "He's a clown. He has long hair and a big swirly cone nose. He's got long arms and baggy pants with striped socks. He always smiles." I realized my son was talking about an imaginary friend. I suppose it was normal for kids his age to have imaginary friends, especially when he has no real kids to play with. Probably just a phase. The rest of the day went as usual, and it was starting to get late, so I put James to bed, tucked him in, gave him a kiss, and made sure to turn on his nightlight before I closed the door. I was pretty tired myself, so I decided to go to bed not long after. I had an awful nightmare. It was dark. I was in some kind of a run-down amusement park. I was scared, running through an endless field of empty tents, broken down rides, and abandoned game huts. The whole place had a horrible look to it. Everything was black and white. The prized stuffed animals all hung from nooses in the game huts, all with sick grins stitched into their faces. It felt like the whole park was looking at me, even though there wasn't any living thing in sight. And then suddenly I began to hear music play. The sounds of Pop Goes the Weasel being played on a squeak box echoed through the park. It was hypnotizing. I followed its tune to the circus tent almost in a trance, unable to stop my legs from moving forward. It was pitch black. The only light came from a single spotlight shining on the center of the big top. As I walked towards the light, the music slowed down. I found myself singing along, unable to stop. All around the mulberry bush, the monkey chased the weasel. The monkey thought 'twas all in fun. The music stopped right before its climax. And suddenly, the light shot on. The intensity of the light was practically blinding. All I could see was a small dark silhouette shuffle towards me. Then another one appeared. And another? And another. There was a dozen of them, all coming towards me. I couldn't move. My legs were frozen, and all I could do was watch as the haunting figures drew near me. As they got closer, I could see they were children. As I looked at each one, I noticed that they were all horribly disfigured and mutilated. Some had cuts all over their bodies, others were severely burned, and others were missing limbs, even eyes. The children enveloped me, clawing at my flesh, dragging me to the ground and tearing inside me. As the children tore me apart and I faded away, all I could hear was laughter. Horrible, evil, awful laughter. I woke up the next morning in a cold sweat. After taking a few deep breaths, I looked over and saw that a few of James's action figures were positioned facing me on the top of my nightstand. I sighed. James had probably woken up early and put these here. I gathered up the toys, made my way over to James's room. However, when I opened the door, James was sound asleep. I just shrugged and placed the toys back in his toy box, headed out to the living room. A little while later, James woke up and I made him breakfast. He was quiet, seemed a bit groggy, perhaps he didn't sleep very well. I decided to ask him about the toys. And James, honey, did you put the toys in Dad's room this morning? His eyes shot up at me for a moment, and then quickly glanced down at his cereal. Laughing Jack did it. I rolled my eyes and responded, "Well, you tell Laughing Jack to keep the toys in your room." James nodded and finished up his breakfast, then decided to go out and play in the backyard. I went to relax in the living room and must have dozed off because I woke up a couple hours later. Shit! I need to go check on James. I was a bit worried that it had been over 2 hours and I hadn't checked on him. I stepped out into the backyard, but James wasn't there anymore. Oh, I was getting nervous, so I called him out. James! James, where are you? Just then I heard a giggle coming from the front yard. I rushed through the gate and around the front of the house. James was sitting on the sidewalk. I breathed a sigh of relief and walked over to him. James, how many times have I told you to stay in the back? James, what are you eating? James looked up at me and then reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of hard candies in all colors. This made me very nervous. James, who gave you that candy? James just stared at me, not speaking. James, tell Dad who gave you that candy. James hung his head low and said, "Laughing Jack gave it to me." My heart sunk. I knelt down and looked him in the eye. James, I've had enough of this damn Laughing Jack thing. He's not real. Now, this is a very serious situation. I need to know who gave you that candy. I could see my son's eyes tearing up. But Dad, Laughing Jack did give me the candy. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. James had never lied to me, but what he's telling me is impossible. I made him spit out the candy and throw the rest away. James appeared to be fine. Maybe I'm just overreacting. After all, he could have gotten it from Tom and Linda from next door, or Mr. Walker down the street. Either way, I'm going to have to keep a closer eye on James. That night, I put James to bed as usual and decided to go to bed early myself. Suddenly, I was awoken by a loud bang coming from the kitchen. I sprung out of bed and hurried down the stairs. When I got to the kitchen, I was horrified. Everything on the counters had been thrown to the floor. Our dog Fido hung dead from the light fixture. His stomach was cut open and stuffed with candy, the same type that James was eating earlier that day. My shock was quickly broken by a sharp scream coming from James's room, followed by loud crashes. I quickly grabbed a knife from the drawer and moved up the stairs with the speed that only a father whose child was in danger could have. I burst through the door and flicked on the lights. Everything in the room was knocked over and tossed to the floor, and my poor son was in his bed crying and shaking with fear. A pool of urine stained the sheets. I scooped up my child and ran out of the house, went next door to Tom and Linda's house, and luckily they were still awake. They let me use the phone to call the police. It didn't take them long to arrive, and I explained what happened. They looked at me as if I was crazy. They searched the house, but all they found was the dead dog and 2 trashed rooms. The officer told me that someone had probably gotten into the house and done this right before making a quick escape, when they heard me coming up the stairs. I knew it wasn't true. All the doors were locked. None of the windows were open. Whatever was in my house didn't come from outside. The next day, James stayed inside. I didn't want him to leave my sight. I went to the garage, found my old baby monitor, and set it up in his room. If anything comes into his room tonight, I was going to be able to hear it. I went to the kitchen, grabbed the largest knife from the drawer, put it on my nightstand. Imaginary friend or not, I'm not letting anything hurt my little boy. And soon enough, night came. I put James to bed. He was afraid, but I promised him that I wouldn't let anything hurt him. I tucked him in, gave him a kiss, turned on the nightlight, and before closing the door, I whispered to him, "Good night, James. I love you." I tried to stay up as long as I could. But after a few hours, I felt myself drifting off. My baby would be safe for the night, and I needed to sleep. And just as I laid my head down on the pillow, I heard a soft noise come from the baby monitor that I had put on my nightstand. At first it sounded like interference, like the kind a radio would make. Then it turned into a soft moan. Was James asleep? Then I heard it. The laugh from my nightmare, that horrible laugh. I sprung up from the bed and grabbed the knife from under my pillow. I rushed over to James's room and creaked the door open. I tried the light switch, but it wouldn't come on. I took a step in, and I could feel the warm, thick liquid on my feet. Suddenly, James's nightlight came on, and I could see... I could see the absurd horror laid out in front of me. James's body was nailed up on the wall. The nails pierced through his hands and feet, and his chest was cut wide open, and his organs hung down to the floor, and his eyes and tongue had been removed along with most of his teeth, and I was disgusted. I could hardly believe that this was my baby boy. And then I heard it again. That soft, desperate moan. God. James was still alive. My baby, my poor boy, in such pain, could barely cling to life, and I ran across the room and I vomited on the floor, but my sickness was interrupted by a horrible cackle coming from behind me, and I spun around, and while I was still wiping bile from my mouth, then out of the shadows emerged the fiend responsible for the horror. Laughing Jack. His ghost white skin and matted black hair hung down to his shoulders. He had piercing white eyes surrounded by black rings. His twisted smile revealed a row of sharp, jagged teeth, and his skin didn't look like skin at all. It almost looked like rubber or plastic. He wore a patchy black and white clown outfit with striped sleeves and socks. His body itself was grotesque. His long arms hung down past his waist. The way he was poised made him look almost boneless, like a rag doll. He let out a sickening laugh as if to let me know that he was pleased with my reaction to his work. I turned around slowly in front of James and began to laugh even more at the horrific sight that he laid out. That was enough to shake me from my terror, and I snapped, "Get away from him, you bastard!" I rushed at the monster, raised the knife above my head, and stabbed down at him. But as soon as the knife touched him, he disappeared like a cloud of black smoke. The knife passed right through him and pierced James' still beating heart, splashing the warm blood on my face. No. What have I done? My baby. I've killed my baby. I immediately fell to my knees. I couldn't hear. I could hear sirens in the distance growing louder, and my boy, my sweet baby boy. I promised that Daddy would protect you, but I failed. I'm sorry, James. I'm so sorry. Police soon arrived and found me in front of my son, still wielding the knife covered in my baby's blood, and the trial was short. Insanity. I was placed in Ferropolis House for the Criminally Insane, where I had been for the past 2 months. It's not bad here. The only reason I'm awake now is because someone is playing Pop Goes the Weasel outside my window. I'll talk to the orderlies about it in the morning.
Everybody knows that if you surf the web long enough, you'll see some sick shit. This is especially true if you intentionally dwell into the dark underbelly of the internet. I've seen quite a few things I don't care to admit to, but one thing that I always remember is a site called normalpornfornormalpeople.com. The first strange thing about the site was that I didn't find it by actually looking for it. It was emailed to me by someone I didn't know. The email was as follows. Hi there. Found this site is very nice, thought you might like it. Normalpornfornormalpeople.com. Pass it on, for the good of mankind. Pretty standard issue chain letter, although the URL in the last remark really piqued my curiosity. I was having a very boring day when I got this, so I made sure that my antivirus was working, and then I clicked on it. It was a very average, very generic looking site. It gave the impression that the creators just barely gave a shit about making it look professional. The author seemed to have a very tenuous grasp on English, and on the front page was a long, boring, and incoherent rant that I don't remember, or have saved. The site had a strange tagline, which, even today, people haven't figured out the meaning of, which was, Normal Porn for Normal People, a website dedicated to the eradication of abnormal sexuality. And from the sound of that, I wasn't sure whether I was here to watch porn or if I had stumbled into some kind of eugenics program. But I was here now, and I was very, very curious to see what normal people get their rocks off to. So I scrolled down through the rant, and nothing. The page didn't seem to link to anywhere else, and I was about to leave when I noticed every word of the rant was its own hyperlink. So I clicked on one of them, and was sent to a white page with a very long list of links in the form of normalpeople.com, normalpornfornormalpeople.com/random letters. So I stopped for a minute and asked myself if I really wanted to waste God knows how much time clicking on random links that will likely give me a virus that will rape my computer. I figured I'd just try it for maybe 5 minutes, just to see if anything came up. I clicked on one of the links, and it sent to another page. This page apparently had totally different URLs than the last one. I was just about to say, well, fuck this, when I clicked on the third link, and a video download came up. It was called Peanut.avi. It was a 30-minute video of a man, a woman, and a dog in a kitchen. The woman would make a peanut butter sandwich, and the man would set it down for the dog to eat. This was all that happened for 30 minutes. It was obvious the cameraman had to stop filming and wait until the dog was ready to eat again, and the dog seemed rather sick by the end of it. I know what you're thinking. What the hell does this have to do with porn? I mean, I have no clue. I've seen a little over 24 videos from this site, and the majority have no sexual activity at all. After watching Peanut.avi, I went on a certain image board that I frequent to play online show and tell, like I always do with weird shit like this. But someone had already made a thread about it. Some guy who had received the same chain letter that I did. The image board thread got lots of people with nothing better to do than to dig through the site, and that's how I saw the other videos. Most of those 24 videos were very uneventful, and consisted of people talking to the cameraman in a room with nothing in it but a desk and a few chairs. I mean, literally nothing on the walls, or in terms of furniture. The whole room had a very cold, sterile feel to it. The conversations were just idle banter about previous jobs or embarrassing childhood memories. I kept expecting some kind of discussion about what the people were filming or what the site was about. But of course, nothing. You would never know these videos had anything to do with porn if you saw it out of context. I will say one thing though, the people who appeared in these videos were quite attractive. However, the other videos that actually did feature content, which I suppose could be called sexual, is where things got weird. I'll give you a brief description of the stranger videos. If you've really eaten up the curiosity, you try to hunt them down on a torrent site. LickedClean.avi, a 10-minute video filmed by a hidden camera in which we see a repairman working on a washing machine for the first 2 minutes. When it's fixed, the repairman talks to the owner briefly, then leaves. The owner checks to make sure the repairman is gone, and he begins to lick all over the washing machine. This goes on for 7 minutes. Jimbo.avi, a 5-minute video of an obese mime performing his act. It was actually pretty funny, particularly one part where he pretends to pull up a chair, then pretends that it breaks because of his weight. In the last 30 seconds of the video, the camera cuts to static briefly, and cuts back to the man sobbing, quietly, still wearing mime outfit and makeup. Some kind of obscure fetish? Diana.avi, 4-minute video in which the cameraman talks to a woman in a room different than the interview room. This room looks like one you'd find in a normal person's house. Exactly where they are is never specified, as Diana only talks about her playing the violin. She obviously plays her violin, but she keeps getting distracted by something. I didn't notice this until someone in the image board thread pointed it out, but if you look at a mirror in the background, you can see a fat man in a chicken mask masturbating. Jessica.avi, another 4-minute cameraman video. This time he's outside a house talking to another young woman. They talk about canoe rides, and the camera zooms out to reveal the city streets behind them occasionally. The strange thing is, no one so far has been able to identify where the street is. Guesses have ranged anywhere from Europe to Australia to the Philippines, but there's yet to be a match for the street shown in the video. Tonguetied.avi, 10-minute video. The first 5 minutes consist of an elderly woman making out with a mannequin. The video cuts out like it did in the Jimbo.avi halfway through, and the screen is now a group of mannequins huddled together in a circle around the camera. The lights have been dimmed, and the elderly woman is nowhere to be seen. From this point on, there is no sound. Stumps.avi, 5-minute long video where a man with no legs is attempting to breakdance or on a DDR mat in what looks like a kitchen, like the kitchen from Peanut.avi, much dirtier. There's a radio playing music unseen in the background, but it stops at 4 minutes, and the man collapses on the mat in exhaustion. He breathes heavily and pleads with someone off-screen to let him rest. The off-screen person becomes terrifyingly enraged and yells at him to keep dancing, which he does. You can hear this off-screen person begin to scream as the video ends, abruptly. Privacy.avi. The woman from Diana.avi is masturbating on a mattress in the interview room, while the man from Stumps.avi walks around on his hands while wearing some kind of goblin mask. The door in this room was always closed in the other videos, but it's open now. In this video, the only light is in the room, and the hallway is dark. Near the end of the video, you can see an animal quickly run through the hallway. And finally, the last video was uncovered. Useless.avi. In this 18-minute video, a blonde woman from one of the previous interview videos is tied down to a mattress in the interview room. She attempts to scream, but her mouth is taped over. After 7 minutes, A man in a black suit and mask opens the door, but he does not enter. He holds the door open for the animal that was running in the hallway in the previous video. It's revealed to be an adult chimpanzee, its hair shaved and its entire body painted red. It seemed to be starved and abused, with several wounds along its shoulder and back. When the chimp enters the room, the masked man closes the door behind it. The chimpanzee sniffs the air for a moment, must have been blind, and notices the woman tied to the mattress. It goes to it into a frenzy and begins to maul her. The assault goes on for a grueling 7 minutes until the woman finally dies. The chimp eats flesh from her corpse for 4 minutes, as the video ends. The thread exploded with activity after this video was uncovered, and people discovered it long into the night. When I came back to the image board the next day, I found that the thread was deleted. I tried to start another one, and they banned me. I tried emailing the guy who sent me the chain letter with the site's URL, sent him 5 messages, never got a response. I tried to discuss this website on various places, and I get banned frequently. The site itself was also deleted about 3 days after useless.avi was uncovered, likely because someone contacted the authorities about it. The only proof that normalpornfornormalpeople.com ever existed was a few screen caps people took, and videos from the site that people saved and uploaded onto torrents. The most popular of which being useless.avi, which found its way onto a few gore sites. Wherever you uploaded them to, all the videos from normalpornfornormalpeople.com get deleted after a while. The following is a short-lived research project on Slenderman. There are woodcuts dated back to the 16th century in Germany, featuring a tall, disfigured man with only white spheres where his eyes should be. They called him Der Grobman, basically means a tall man. He was a fairy who lived in the Black Forest. Bad children who crept into the woods at night would be chased by the Slender Man, and he wouldn't leave them alone until he caught them, or the child told the parents what he or she had done. Even then, there's this chilling account from an old journal dating around 1702. It's translated from German, so words may be inaccurate. My child Lars, he is gone, taken from his bed. The only thing we found was a scrap of black clothing. It feels like cotton, but it's softer, thicker. Lars came into my bedroom yesterday screaming at the top of his lungs that the angel is outside. I asked him what he was talking about, and he told me some nonsense fairy story about Der Grobman. He said he went into the groves by our village and found one of my cows dead, hanging from a tree. I thought nothing of it at first, but now he's gone. We must find Lars, and my family must leave before we're killed. I'm sorry, my son. I should have listened. May God forgive me. There's another one, but it's actually from a book. So once the Slender Man began popping up in this thread, I could have sworn something about it seemed familiar. I'm an amateur folklorist, so I have a few source books lying around. It took me a while, but I finally found something on W.K. McNeill's Ghost Stories of the American South. Most of the tales collected are transcripts of recordings other folklorists made, but McNeill compiles them and offers notes. A really handy book. So, anyway, this particular story appears in the book's 7th section, Other Supernatural Creatures. Quote, when I was younger, a cousin of mine came to live with us. He was older than me and my sisters, maybe 16 or 17, and we were the only folk we had left in the world, really. He was the awfulest liar you ever know. Anything he'd tell you was a lie, almost. I liked him all right. We slept in a loft during the summer because it was cooler up there, me and him, and in the winters we slept on the floor, closer to the stove. My sisters had their own room. So one night my cousin wakes me up by punching me in the shoulder. And it's summer, so we're both up to the loft. And my first thought when he woke me up is just to punch him out, because I'm not happy being waked up, you know? But before I could say anything, he puts his hand over my mouth. And even though it's dark, I can hear he's scared. "Listen," he says. And so I listen real careful. It's this scratching. Like something on the roof. And the roof is right over our heads, mind you, because we're in the loft. I was a trifle rattled, but I wasn't having none of it. "So?" I says to him. "It's just some raccoon or a cat." "No," says John. "I heard it before I woke you up. It's like footsteps. Like someone's walking up there." I wasn't taking no truck with that. I told you he was the awfulest liar, so I went back to sleep. But the next day my cousin tried to tell Pop about it, and Pop wasn't having the truck with it either. But one night later on, when we was all having supper, Pop sat up my younger sister to fetch water from the pump we had in back. After a while, we hear Lily scream. Then it was Ma who got up first, then Pop. The rest of us stayed at the table because we were like to get in trouble if Lily got hurt and we were there to gloat. Soon enough, though, we heard Pop and Ma shouting too, so me and John went out to go see if they needed our help. All they had was the water pail Lily carried out, and there wasn't no sign of her. At first I didn't understand what was going on, with both Pop and Ma shouting, but by the time my other sisters came out, and they started crying, and my cousin was just standing there in the yard looking off toward something. "It's the man walking yonder," he says. And he's pointing out across the field. No one's listening to him but me. And he keeps saying it. "It's the man walking yonder. It's that man walking yonder." You already know it's supper time, so... You know the sun was setting, and it was hard to see, but I looked over that field at the back of the house. The whole thing lit up orange, and there was this row of black trees. That was the edge of the woods, you know? And I swear to you that I saw one of them trees moving like a man walking away. But it couldn't have been a man, because there ain't no man that tall and skinny. Pop's seen it too, I think. He took us inside and locked all the doors. He made us keep still while he got out his rifle. We waited like that all night, Ma crying the whole time. When the sun came up, we took a wagon into town and told folks what happened, though as I recall, nothing much came of it. John ran off a few weeks later. We got a new house closer to the mill where Pop was working. I still can't manage to look at trees during sunset, though. Especially not on windy days when they all move back and forth. You know, like a man walking away. From what I've read so far, and based on various internet memes and other sites debating Slenderman, he operates on the power of belief and feeds on fear. As for the operator symbol for fear of my safety, I won't write it or even draw it. But, there are many debates as to what it is and how it connects to Slendy. Some say that when you're looking at him, Slenderman can teleport, so the operator symbol is a representation of him born to the minds of those haunted by him. So he can teleport to them wherever they are. Some say it represents his face, the circle being his head and the X representing the featurelessness. One far-fetched theory states that it's a window he uses to peer into our world. This is one of my favorite quotes. There's another way of looking at it. Perhaps it doesn't actually mean anything. You ascribe the meaning to it. Since you are familiar with the mythos, seeing makes you think of Slenderman. And since Slenderman operates on the power of belief, it turns it into a sort of mimetic thought weapon. I'm done researching. I can't stand this feeling. I'm really paranoid, and it feels as if I'm being watched. This was a short-lived research project, but I don't want to know anymore. From what I've read, he exists based on belief. And if that's so, my research may provoke him. I started all this because I was watching Marble Hornets videos after someone had mentioned them on Facebook. And it piqued my curiosity. And they made me remember something. Something that happened a few years ago. Something I've tried really hard to forget. I was sleeping. And at the time, my bed was facing parallel with my hallway. I awoke one night, after everyone was asleep in my house. I was staring at the top of my bed. I had a bunk bed. I shared with my little brother, and I was on the bottom. And I had this unnerving feeling in my stomach. I felt as if someone was watching me. And it almost felt as if that it was in my hallway. So, being an inquisitive little kid, I unwillingly turned my head to look. Thinking back, I wish that I hadn't. There was something tall and dark standing there, staring at me. It was dark, so none of its features were clear, but I could make out its silhouette. It was a tall, thin creature that just stood there, staring at me. I tried to scream, but no noise came from my throat. Immediately afterward, the thing took a step forward, and I blacked out. When I came to again, it was so dark, so not much time could have passed, and after an unwilling glance down my hall, I saw it was gone. I had no idea what Slender Man was at the time, so immediately dismissed it as a ghost of some sort. I know for a fact it wasn't a dream because everything was so real. The fear I felt, the choking sensation in my throat as I tried to scream, and blacking out. I can't even describe what that felt like. Other than the 1 second, I was petrified and trying to scream, and then the next, I was staring at the top of my bed again. The next morning, I told my mom, and being a narrow-minded adult, she told me that it must have been a bad dream. But watching those videos brought back that memory, and after reading up on them, I want to bury that memory, because if what they say is true, then he lives on belief and fear. I wish I could say that this is just another creepypasta, that, some sleep-deprived teen suddenly inspired to record after downing a can of Monster and reading too many scary memes. I wish I could tell you that I'm just making all this up to give some creepypasta lovers a good scare. But I can't. Everything I've said is true. And honestly, I don't care if anyone believes me. I just want to get this out. Slender Man is real. I've seen him. And I give this one bit of advice to anyone else that's seen him, or wants to be brave enough and go find him. Don't. I got lucky because I was able to get rid of that memory and not think about it. But others may not be that lucky. So I leave you with this. Slender Man is real. Don't go looking for him. And if you do see him, forget you ever did. For those who stare into the abyss, eventually find the abyss staring back.
Does anyone remember this kids show? It was called Candle Cove, and I must have been 6 or 7. I never found reference to it anywhere, so I think it was on a local station around 1971 or 1972. I lived in Ironton at the time. I don't remember which station, but I do remember that it was on at a weird time, like 4 p.m.
It seems really familiar to me. I grew up outside of Ashland and was 9 years old in 72. Candle Cove. Was it about pirates? I remember a pirate marionette at the mouth of a cave talking to a little girl.
Yes, okay, I'm not crazy. I remember Pirate Percy. I was always kind of scared of him. He looked like he was built from parts of other dolls. Real low budget. His head was an old porcelain baby doll. Looked like an antique that didn't belong on the body. I don't remember what station this was. I don't think it was WTSF, though.
Sorry to resurrect this old thread, but I know exactly what show you mean, Sky Shale. I think Candle Cove ran for a couple of months in 71, not 72. I was 12 and I watched it a few times with my brother. It was channel 58, whatever station that was. My mum would let me switch to it after the news. Let me see what I remember. It took place in Candle Cove, and it was about a little girl who imagined herself to be friends with pirates. The pirate ship was called the Laughingstock, and Pirate Percy wasn't a very good pirate because he got scared too easily, and there was calliope music constantly playing. I don't remember the girl's name, Janice or Jade or something. I think it was Janice.
Thanks, Jaren! Memories flooded back when you mentioned the Laughingstock in Channel 58. I remember the bow of the ship was a wooden smiling face with the lower jaw submerged. It looked like it was swallowing the sea, and it had that awful Ed Wynn voice and laugh. I especially remember how jarring it was when they switched from the wooden plastic model to the foam puppet version of the head that talked.
I remember now too. Do you remember this part, Sky Shale? You have to go inside.
Ugh. Mike, I got a chill reading that. Yes, I remember. That's what the ship always told Percy when there was a spooky place he had to go in. Like a cave or a dark room where the treasure was. And the camera would push in on Laughingstock's face with each pause. You have to go inside. With his two eyes askew and that flopping foam jaw and the fishing line that opened and closed it. Ugh! It just looks so cheap and awful. You guys remember the villain? He had a face that was just a handlebar mustache above really tall, narrow teeth.
I honestly thought the villain was Pirate Percy. I was about 5 when the show was on. Nightmare
That
fuel.
wasn't the villain, the puppet with the mustache. That was the villain's sidekick, Horace Horrible. He had a monocle too, but it was on top of the mustache. I used to think that meant he had only one eye. But yeah, the villain was another marionette, the Skin Taker. I can't believe what they used to let us watch back then.
Jesus H. Christ. The Skin Taker. What kind of a kid's show were we watching? I seriously could not even look at the screen when the Skin Taker showed up. He just descended out of nowhere on his strings. Just a dirty skeleton wearing that brown top hat and cape. And his glass eyes that were too big for his skull. Christ almighty.
Wasn't his top hat and cloak all sewn up crazily? Was that supposed to be children's skin?
Yeah, I think so. Remember his mouth didn't open and close, his jaw just slid back and forth? I remember the little girl said, "Why does your mouth move like that?" And the Skin Taker didn't look at the girl but at the camera and said, "To grind your skin."
Oh, I'm so relieved that other people remember this terrible show. I used to have this awful memory. A bad dream I had where the opening jingle ended, the show faded in from black and all the characters were there. But the camera was just cutting to each of their faces, and they were just screaming. And the puppets and marionettes were flailing spastically, and just all screaming. Screaming. The girl was just moaning and crying like she'd been through hours of this. I woke up many times from that nightmare. I used to wet the bed when I had it.
I don't think that was a dream. I remember that. I remember that was an episode.
No. Not possible. There was no plot or anything. I mean, literally just standing in place crying and screaming for the whole show.
Maybe I'm manufacturing the memory because you said that, but I swear to God, I remember seeing what you described. They just screamed.
Oh God, yes. The little girl, Janice. I remember seeing her shake. And the skin taker screaming through his gnashing teeth. His jaw careening so widely, I thought it would come off its wire hinges. I turned it off and it was the last time I watched. I ran to tell my brother and we didn't have the courage to turn it back on.
I visited my mom today at the nursing home. I asked her about when I was little in the early 70s, when I was 8 or 9, and if she remembered a kid show, Candle Cove. She said she was surprised that I could remember that, and I asked why, and she said because I used to think that it was so strange that you said, "I'm going to watch Candle Cove now, Mom." And then you would tune the TV to static and just watch dead air for 30 minutes. You had a big imagination with your little pirate show. Here's my story. 16. Black and have a family down in Alabama. They farm and own a huge amount of land in Huntsville. Uncle owns a big house and a bunch of trailers they put out in the woods for hunting and camping. Down south, cousin suggests that we go there to camp. Now, I'm a city kid from Chicago, so they tease the fuck out of me. Collect food, kill a pig and some chickens, and bring necessities to camp out for a few days. We go to the camp and it's obvious something is wrong. Air has this weird electric smell, like right before a storm, like ozone. And we think nothing of it, unpack and go down to a little creek to swim for a few hours. All of a sudden, some older white guy and a white teenager come out of the bushes. He has a shotgun in the crook of his arm and says hello and asks us what we're doing this far back in the woods. Tell him about my uncle, who he knows, and say that we're camping out. He tells us we need to be real careful out here and stick together. There was a big animal in the woods. His son, who's my age, asks if he can stay and hang out with us. He says okay. So, we end up playing football. Dicking around with me, there's the white kid, Tanner, 5 of my cousins, and then 4 of their friends. In total, there were 5 girls and 6 boys, so we're all around 15 or 17. We ended up just dicking the whole day away. So, we head back to the camp and pulling out some stuff for a campfire, even though the trailers both had kitchenettes. Well, Tanner says that his family property sits up against my uncle's. He wants to run home and ask his dad if he can come out camping with us. And my cousin Rooster says that he's going to go with him since it's going to get dark soon. One of the girls also wants to tag along. Well, it's about 7 o'clock, and it's starting to get pretty dark. They take flashlights and take the trail towards Tan's property. The rest of us chill. We make s'mores, drink, kiss on the girls. About 30 or 40 minutes later, there's the smell of ozone again. And you could smell it over the smell of the fire that we had started, and this really nasty coppery-like smell, like right after you've had a nosebleed and it stopped. It wasn't exactly like dried blood, but it was that nasty metallic back of your throat smell. We immediately think that it's some kind of electric malfunction, or someone left a hot plate on or some shit. So we reach the trailers and nothing's on. We can all smell it. All of a sudden we hear people booking down the path towards us, and Rooster, Tan, and the girl all come running into the clearing out of breath, and they don't even break stride, they all run right into the trailer, right by where the fire is. We all got the fuck out of there and get into the trailers. Well, they end up calming down. Even Rooster is crying his fucking eyes out at this point. All the while, the fire is guttering lower and lower, so my other cousins say fuck it, and are about to go inside to get the generator out of the shed between the trailers. Tanner goes, fuck no. Lock the front door, ain't nobody else getting outside. He's been crying too, and his eyes are bloodshot and puffy, and his pants are as dirty as shit. He goes on to tell us that they went up to his house, and his father said sure he could go out camping, but to make sure that they were careful on the way back, and that maybe they should take one of the hunting rifles just in case. Evidently, Hunter had seen something in their yard a few days before. One of their pigs had come up ripped up and half-eaten. So they assumed that it was just some big cats or coyotes, even though they didn't usually fuck with live animals. Well, he'd gone upstairs, packed his stuff, and told his dad that they'd be okay without the rifle because coyotes avoid people. So they started walking back towards where we were camping. So Rooster finally stopped crying and shaking, and the girl already had, but she was just staring out the window with a dumb look on her face. And he says that they had gotten halfway into the woods toward the camp when they started to hear shit in the forest. It was almost pitch black by this time, so they weren't sure at first what the fuck it was. The girl says that she heard something in the bushes right off the trail, and they all beamed their flashlights over there, and there was someone standing back in the woods in a little hollow. Rooster said that they shouted at him and told him that he was scaring the fuck out of them and what a dick he was. He says that's when he realized that the guy was facing away from them. So they keep walking, and they start smelling the nasty coppering ozone smell, and they say that they look off into the forest on the opposite side, and it's a dude standing in the forest, backwards, slightly closer to the path. So now they start power walking, and Tan keeps going, I should have taken the fucking rifle. As they're telling their story, the smell is still super strong, even inside the cabin. They say that after they started walking faster, the kind of low gibbering had started coming from out of both sides of the woods. They started booking it back to the trailer. The girl said that she had flashed her flashlight out into the woods to the side of them, and they had seen something jerking itself through the woods, and the gibbering just got louder and louder. And when they could see the light from out of the campfire, something had come out of the woods about 40 yards behind them onto the track, and they had just flat out ran as hard as they could to the trailer. So we're out of the fucking woods, and we're assuming at this point it's some rednecks or some shit trying to fuck with us. And all of a sudden my other cousin, Junior, starts going on about how he went to school with a native kid that was telling him about the goat man or some shit. We promptly tell him to shut the fuck up, because we don't need any spooky talk right now. But he just keeps going on and on about how it's the fucking goat man, and how we're in his woods, and blah blah blah. Now at this time, I had never heard of a goat man, or any of that, but a couple of years ago, the year before I graduated from college, I met him for a roommate, and I ended up asking him about it. And to sum it up, it's basically a fucking guy with the head of a goat and can shapeshift, and he gets among groups of people to terrorize them. It's also supposed to be kind of like the Wendigo, and it's bad mojo to even talk about it, and well, it's even worse when you see it. Keep in mind, I didn't know this back when I was 16. So my cousin is going, the goat man's going to get in and fucking get us. And the girls are all terrified. My cousins and I are all fucking trying to figure out if it's just some hillbillies or some animal. So all of a sudden, the smell goes away. Like, to this day, I haven't even experienced anything like it. Like, usually the smell fades away or gets less. It just literally was there 1 second and not the next. So after an hour, making it around 9 or 10, we stopped shitting bricks enough to go back outside and stoke the fire again. We figured it was just some asshole trying to fuck with us. So we don't go back home, because we think if we do, they'll chase us through the woods or some crazy shit. Nothing else weird happens that night. And we stay another night. And for the main part of the night, nothing happens. About 1 in the morning, we're outside getting drunk and telling ghost stories. And someone is finishing some too spooky story. I don't remember what about. But the smell comes back. And it's so fucking strong that one of the girls literally starts vomiting. I stand up and you can actually feel how clammy the air is. And I say that we should go inside. This isn't right. We should have just fucking left. We all go back inside, and we're standing around, and my cousin just keeps going on about how it's the goat man, and my cousin Rooster tries to shut him the fuck up. All the while, I'm just feeling that something is wrong, and I can't figure out what the fuck it is. We end up sitting there for a while, and the smell is just as strong. And we're terrified and all huddled in this camper, and we end up cooking brats for everyone because nobody wants to go outside. It's one of those packs with 4 brats in a pack that we had a total of 3 packs. I grill them up on the stove and give everyone a hot dog. I get mine. After a while, one of my cousins gets up and goes over to the pot to get another one. He starts grumbling about how the fuck do I get 2 and everybody else gets 1. And I look at him like he's fucking stupid. I tell him that everyone got 1 because there's 12 brats. If you wanted more, you should open up a new pack and cook some more. And that's when the girl that had been out with Rooster and Tan just starts screaming, "Oh Jesus, oh Lord, get out!" She screams and shivers, and when it dawns on the cousin standing up, what the fuck is wrong, me and him both glance around the room, and I feel my heart fucking sink. I run the fuck out of the cabin. The girl runs out with us. The trailer door is banging against the side of the trailer as everyone books out of the cabin. One of my cousin's friends asks us what the fuck is wrong, and I start counting us. And there's only 11 now. I shit you not, my cousin verified. There had been 12 people in the cabin, but being that everyone didn't really know each other well, nobody had really noticed the whole fucking time, but there was an extra person. And then I realized earlier that I had kind of noticed something was off. You know how when you're just dicking around having a good time, you don't sweat the small stuff. You don't always keep track of certain stuff, but I'm dead sure that someone else had been in that trailer with us, and that they had been there for at least a fucking day, eating with us. And what makes it worse, I could figure out which one, because I don't think anyone ever actually interacted with the other person. Goat man. The girl kept praying to Jesus, and we're all sitting outside, and eventually we get big ass sticks and go back into the cabin, and there's nobody there. We count again, and there's 11 people. We go back to the trailer and lock the door. We explain what the fuck happened, and the girl says that she realized too, and that's when he was about to say something. The person sitting next to her had grabbed her leg hard, leaned over toward her, and said something that she couldn't understand. So we all pretty much scared as fuck, and we huddled together, and then I fall asleep. And when I wake up, the sun is just coming up, and half the people are asleep, and then half are packing our shit up. We all want to walk back home, but like 4 people want to stay until the sun is all the way up, and some people think that we're just fucking around and still want to stay at the trailers. I just want to get the fuck out of the woods. The girl's name was Kira, the one that the goatman had touched. Anyway, I asked her if she really thinks there was something bad, and she says that she just wants to go home. She doesn't want to be out in the woods alone for another night. So we decide to split up, and the 4 that want to go can go, and that I have to stay because I have the keys to the cabin, and it's my uncle's, and I have to lock up. I'm super pissed at this point because I feel like people aren't taking the shit seriously, and I definitely don't want to be out here in the woods for another night. So I spend the rest of the day trying to convince the rest of the people, now 4 girls, 4 guys, to get the fuck out of Dodge. And Tanner leaves with them to go get a rifle and says that he's going to be back. So, there are 7 of us left. This is about 4 p.m. Around 5, he hasn't made it back yet, and we're extremely fucking antsy, and the only reason I stopped begging them to go was because he went to get a gun. It's about 5:30 or so, when the cousin that did stay says that the girl Kira is outside. We all look outside, and sure enough, she's standing by the fire pit with her back to the cabin. I'm thinking to myself, she was so fucking scared. Why the fuck did she come back? And I get this antsy feeling in my gut. Keep in mind, the whole time, the coppery smell has been gone, but now I realize I can smell just a twinge of it. I say this to the rest of them, and everybody. These are the people that wanted to stay in the fucking woods after we had the goddamn goat man in our midst, are laughing at me and asking me did I set this up to scare them. And I'm looking at them like I am not fucking bullshitting you at all right now. I asked them, why the fuck would I play like that? So, one of the girls goes outside to get Kara. She gets halfway to her and stops cold. Kira starts heaving. I don't know how the fuck to describe it. Sort of like, if somebody was with their back turned and was laughing without actually making any sound. It was this fact that made me realize it was not a fucking sound in the whole woods. It was dead silent. This was like later in September, so it was still fairly hot at the time, but it was super chilly some days too, and you could usually hear big ass geese honking or some kind of birds or squirrels chittering. So I step out of the door and tell her to come back in the fucking trailer right damn now. She backs up to the trailer. And we lock the fucking door. We pull down all the shades except for one and put a guy there in a chair to watch her. And she stands there for another 20 minutes or so. The guy turns to say that she's still there. And there's this huge fucking bang on the door. We all jump the fuck up and scramble around the living room of the trailer. The banging is so fucking loud. He looks around the room and then gets super pale. He pulls me to the side and whispers in my ear, "You know there's only 7 of us in here, right?" And I get this feeling where my stomach drops to your nuts. It had been back inside the trailer when we were sorting out who was going where, and then when we all went outside to talk earlier in the day, it just slipped right back in there. We looked out the window and there was nobody out there. So we recount everybody, and basically I go over and ask everyone how many people were here earlier. They all say 8. Well, how many are here now? And they all count and then realize there's only 7 people in the cabin. So Tan had brought back a couple of boxes of ammo as well. And he told us that his dad, that there had been some kind of animal in the forest, because he didn't think his dad would have believed him if he said that it was the Goat Man. He says that his cousin is supposed to be coming down in a few hours, and that in the morning we could all go back to his place and his cousin will drive us home. Now, I'm really fucking terrified. But I at least feel better because we can all be American and shoot the fuck out of whatever it is that comes back. But then my cousin gets into this huge argument with one of the girls because she thinks that I'm trying to be funny and prank them, and that she's getting really scared and that I'm not funny. And he keeps telling her that I'm not the kind of guy, and she says, well, how do we know that the girl wasn't just Tanner in a wig? Or if it's really the Goat Man, how do we know that this is the real Tanner and that the Goat Man didn't just kill Tanner in the woods and take his gun? So we fucking get into a huge argument about this, where me and Tan are just like, we could seriously be in danger because at the very least someone has to be sneaking themselves into our fucking trailer without us knowing and mingling with us, and at worst it's something bad in the forest fucking with us. One of the girls is crying and saying that she wants to go right now, and we're all trying to tell her it's no fucking go because none of us are walking through the woods in the middle of the night, and at this point the sun is starting to go down and it's getting a little cloudy out. We eat something and turn on the radio for a while, but we can't really get a station out there with anything decent, so we turn it off. At around the time that Tan's cousin shows up, he was like 19, I think. Well, at this point, the sun is just barely over the horizon, and he has one of those heavy-duty lantern flashlights and another rifle. He walks up to the trailer, and we whisper to Tan, asking if he's sure that's his cousin. He says yes. The guy looks behind him, and all around the camp, and then walks in. He kind of glances at us, and looks a little confused. He asks where your other little buddy is at. I figured that she would meet up at the cabin. Is she a little slow or something? And he also asks whether we had been cooking blood in the cabin because it smelled like bloody and hot pans all the way up the trail, and we were all just like, fucking nope. But we all asked him what the fuck he's talking about with the girl he saw, and he had come down the same trail that Tan had been using, that he had come up on one of your guys' buddies' standing in the middle of the trail, looking at him slack-jawed. And he had asked her a bunch of questions, but all she did was just look at him. And then she smiled at him, and he said that he kept walking, but she couldn't seem to keep up with him. He kept lagging a little bit behind. He said that he asked her if she was hurt or something, and did she need any help. But she continued to stare, and eventually he had been walking and turned around a bend in the trail, but when he turned around and went back to see if she was okay, the trail was empty. He had assumed that she had taken some shortcut through the woods to our trailers. I told him the whole story of what's been going on. I half expected him to say that we're full of shit, but he just listened and then sat down on the couches in the living room. Tanner's cousin gets back to the girl. He says when she had kept trying to lag behind him, it kind of weirded him the fuck out, so he tried to keep her in front of him. No matter how slow he walked, she was always lagging a little bit behind. And that she smiled this nasty smile, and it got stronger as he got to the camp. He said eventually it got really strong. She had said something really low that he didn't catch, and he had turned, and she had been right the fuck up on him, and he stepped back from her. It was at this point that he asked her if she was okay, and if she wanted him to carry her back the rest of the way, and she just kept staring. He said that he reached out for her, as in to grab her on the shoulder, but he must have misjudged the distance because she was off to the side of where he had put his hand, like she had moved while he was looking dead at her. So at this point, we know this shit's real unless Tan is playing a joke, which we can tell he's not because he's almost pissing his pants. So, they load up the rifles. We eat some more, and we just kind of sit around until about 11. And to this fucking day, every time I think about this, I really pray to God that it's just some huge prank that my cousins played on me and just never revealed. So I would just shit for the rest of my life. Yet, at around 11, the stink of copper turns into an actual nasty, gross blood smell, like cooking blood and singed hair. Tan and his cousin Reese get the fuck up instantly and grab the rifles. There was like a half knocking, half clawing at the door, and I shit you not, there's this voice, and it sounds like when you see those YouTube cats and dogs whose owner teaches them how to talk, and it says in this halting, weird tone voice, "Let me the fuck in. Stop fucking playing." It made a fucking chill creep up against my body. One of the girls just starts crying and calling on Jesus, and it was so fucking obviously not a person talking. It didn't have the right cadence. And that's some shit that I never realized until that moment. But all people have a certain cadence when they talk, no matter what language. All people have a certain kind of rhythm to talking. This shit didn't have any kind of cadence and rhythm. YouTube those cats, that's what the fuck it sounded like outside the door. So now I'm in full-on terror mode, and we keep yelling outside, "Who is it? Stop fucking around, man!" And it just keeps saying, "In," or "Let me the fuck in," for almost 15 minutes. Sorry for being on a tangent, but if you can't imagine how this shit sounded, then you can't imagine how fucked up the whole situation was. So then, the smell goes away after a while, and for the next hour or so, you can hear someone basically creeping around the woods and shit, and every couple of minutes, it goes back to the door and says something, and finally, when the smell fades away, it's around 2 in the morning, he says, "Man, fuck this," and open the door, and walks outside with his rifle. He fires a shot into the air, and says something to the effect of, "In the name of Jesus Christ, go away." And he fires 2 more times, and then from the woods, right up against the river across from where the river is, it sounds like something is slowly gibbering and hooting. Then it starts screaming, and it sounds almost like a woman and a cat in a bag screaming together. Like, I seriously have never heard any shit like that. And you could hear the brush over that way start to shake. Reese wanders over into it, into the tree line, and starts backing into the house. And we lock the door, and we can all hear this shit keening and screaming. And Reese says something that had come out of the bushes, super low to the ground, crawling towards the cabin. And he had shot at it. And pretty much, that's how the rest of the night went. It literally was screaming constantly for the next 2 hours. We could hear the shit moving around into the tree line, but it never came back to the cabin until everyone had finally fallen asleep. Tan had been sitting at the chair watching the door with his rifle, and nobody else heard or saw it. And he told me 2 days later, after the whole thing was over, he said that he had been nodding off after the screaming and noises had finally stopped, and he had been almost asleep when he saw someone come out of the bathroom and then lay down on the floor and go to sleep. And he just assumed it was one of us. He had nodded off. And he said he kind of realized something was wrong, and while pretending to be asleep, he counted us. There were 9 people in the cabin. He basically didn't want to try to shoot at the fucking thing in the cabin and have it kill us. Or have Reese wake up and start shooting and then we kill ourselves. So he just stayed awake all night pretending not to be asleep. He said sometimes it would stand up and kind of do this weird jittery thing, or heave like it was laughing. But then it would lay back down. Now the story kind of closes pretty weak, right? Because from my perspective, nothing happened. We woke up and I noticed that Tan was a little jittery and that he was avoiding looking at us. We ate some breakfast, packed up, and started walking to his house. And he stayed last in the cabin and said that he'd lock up and bring me my uncle's keys to just start walking and he'd catch up, which I didn't really want to fucking do. But we got a little up the path and then he came running up and basically we just jogged back to his house and his cousin took us home. There was a window in the bathroom. Tan had gone back to lock up and look in there, and he said there was a window. That we were too stupid to lock that, and that there was no screen on it, and the window was fucking up when he went in there. I'm guessing that he had been doing that all along, waiting for us to fall asleep or slip up and then getting in among us. It walked with us all the goddamn way back to his house. And then he said it lagged to the back of the group and then that looked him dead in the eyes. And then it walked into the woods.
Hey, my name's Mitch. I'm here to tell you guys about an experience I had. I don't know if it was paranormal or whatever stupid words people use to describe supernatural phenomena, but after that thing visited me, I believe in the paranormal trash now. A week after I moved in with my brother, Edwin, after my house was foreclosed, I finished unpacking. Edwin liked the idea of me moving in since we hadn't seen each other since we were 10, so I was excited too. I soon fell asleep after I moved in. After that 1 week, I heard rustling noises coming from outside at about 1 in the morning. I thought it was a raccoon, so I ignored and tried to fall asleep again. The next morning, I told Edwin about it, and he agreed. The next night, however, I thought that I heard my window opening and a loud thump, as if something entered my room. I darted up and looked around my room, but saw nothing. The next morning, Edwin dropped his coffee cup when he saw me. He held up a nearby mirror, and I saw myself. I had a large gash in my left cheek. I was rushed to the hospital, and my doctor told me that I must have been sleepwalking, but then he showed me something that made my blood turn cold. He lifted up my shirt to reveal a sewn-up incision where my kidneys were. I stared in his eyes, my eyes widening. You somehow lost your left kidney last night. We don't know how, though. I'm so sorry, Mitch. The next night was my breaking point. Around midnight, I woke up to see a truly horrific sight. I was staring face to face with a creature with a black hoodie, a dark blue mask with no nose or mouth, staring down at me. The thing that scared me the most was that it had no eyes, just empty black sockets. The creature also had some black substance dripping from those sockets. I grabbed the camera nearby on the mantel and took a picture. After the picture took, the creature lunged at me and tried to claw open my chest to get at my lungs. I stopped it by kicking it in the face. As I ran out of my room, I grabbed my wallet. I would need the money. I ran out of my brother's house into the night. I eventually ended up in the woods near Edwin's house and tripped on a rock. I fell unconscious and woke up in the hospital. My doctor entered the room. The same one who treated me before. I have good news and bad news, Mitch. The doctor started. The good news is that you had minor injuries. Your parents are coming to pick you up. I sighed with relief. The bad news is that your brother was killed by something. I'm so terribly sorry. My parents took me back to Edwin's house to collect my remaining belongings, which I did. Upon entering my room, I was scared, but remained calm. I grabbed my camera, then stopped dead in my tracks. In the hallway leading to my room, I saw Edwin's body and something laying next to it. I picked up the small thing and entered my parents' car, not mentioning Edwin's corpse. I looked at the thing I'd picked up and nearly vomited. I was holding my stolen, half-eaten kidney with some black substance on it. During the summer of 2003, events in the northeastern United States involving a strange, human-like creature sparked brief local media interest before an apparent blackout was enacted. Little or no information was left intact, as most online and written accounts of the creature were mysteriously destroyed. Primarily focused in the rural New York state, self-proclaimed witnesses told stories of their encounters with a creature of unknown origin. Emotions ranged from extremely traumatic levels of fright and discomfort to an almost childlike sense of playfulness and curiosity. While their published versions are no longer on record, the memories remain powerful, and several of the involved parties began looking for answers that year. In early 2006, the collaboration had accumulated nearly 24 documents dating between the 12th century and present day, spanning 4 continents. In almost all cases, the stories were identical. I've been in contact with a member of the group and was able to get some excerpts from their upcoming book. There we go. A Suicide Note, 1964. As I prepare to take my life, I feel it necessary to assuage my guilt or pain I have introduced through this act. It is not the fault of anyone other than him. For once I awoke and felt his presence, and once I awoke and saw his form. Once again I awoke and heard his voice. and looked into his eyes. I cannot sleep without fear of what I might next awake to experience. I cannot ever wake. Goodbye. Also, found in the same wooden box were 2 empty envelopes addressed to William and Rose, and 1 loose personal letter with no envelope. Dearest Linny, I have prayed for you. He spoke your name. And here's one. Journal entry. It's translated from Spanish. 1880. I have experienced the greatest terror. I have experienced the greatest terror. I have experienced the greatest terror. I see his eyes when I close mine. They are hollow, black. They saw me and pierced me. His wet hand. I will not sleep. His voice. And then there's not really, can't really make out the next bit of text here. Okay, here's one. Mariner's Log. This one is 1691. He came to me in my sleep. From the foot of my bed I felt a sensation. He took everything. We must return to England. We shall not return here at the request of the rake. Okay, here's a good one. Witness account from 2006. 3 years ago, I had just returned from a trip from Niagara Falls with my family for the 4th of July. We were all very exhausted after a long day of driving, so my husband and I put the kids right to bed and called it a night. At about 4 a.m., I woke up thinking my husband had gotten up to use the restroom. I used the moment to steal back the sheets, only to wake him in the process. I apologized and told him I thought he'd gotten out of bed. When he turned to face me, he gasped and pulled his feet up from the end of the bed so quickly his knee almost knocked me out of the bed. He then grabbed me and said nothing. After adjusting to the dark for half a second, I was able to see what caused the strange reaction. At the foot of the bed, sitting and facing away from us, there was what appeared to be a naked man, or a large hairless dog of some sort. Its body position was disturbing and unnatural, as if it had been hit by a car or something. For some reason, I was not instantly frightened by it, but more concerned as to its condition. At this point, I was somewhat under the assumption that I was supposed to help him. My husband was peering over his arm and knee, tucked into the fetal position, occasionally glancing at me before returning to the creature. In a flurry of motion, the creature scrambled across the side of the bed, and then crawled quickly in a flailing sort of motion right along the bed until it was less than a foot from my husband's face. The creature was completely silent for about 30 seconds, or probably closer to 5. It just seemed like a while. Just looking at my husband. The creature then placed its hand on his knee and ran into the hallway leading to the kids' room. I screamed and ran for the light switch, planning to stop him before he hurt my children. When I got to the hallway, the light from the bedroom was enough to see it crouched and hunched over about 20 feet away. He turned around and looked directly at me, covered in blood. I flipped the switch on the wall and saw my daughter Clara. The creature ran down the stairs while my husband and I rushed to help our daughter. She was very badly injured and spoke only once more in her short life. She said, "He is the rake." My husband drove his car into the lake that night, while rushing our daughter to the hospital. He did not survive. Being a small town, news got around pretty quick. The police were helpful at first, and the local newspaper took a lot of interest as well. However, the story was never published, and local television news never followed up either. For several months, my son Justin and I stayed in a hotel near my parents' house. After we decided to return home, I began looking for answers myself. I eventually located a man in the next town over who had a similar story. We got in contact and began talking about our experiences. He knew of 2 other people in New York who had seen the creature we are now referring to as the Rake. It took the four of us about 2 solid years of hunting on the internet and writing letters to come up with a small collection of what we believed to be accounts of the rake. None of them gave any details, history, or follow-up. One journal had an entry involving the creature in its first 3 pages, and never mentioned it again. A ship's log explained nothing of the encounter, saying only that they were to leave by order of the rake. That was the last entry in the log. There were, however, many instances where the creature's visit was one of a series of visits with the same person. Multiple people also mentioned being spoken to, my daughter included. This led us to wonder if the rake had visited any of us before our last encounters. So I set up a digital recorder near my bed and left it running all night, every night, for 2 weeks. I would tediously scan through the sounds of me rolling around in bed each day when I woke up. By the end of the second week, I was quite used to the occasional sound of sleep while blaring through the recording at 8 times the normal speed. This still took about an hour every day. But on the first day of the third week, I thought I heard something different. What I found was a shrill voice. It was the rake. I can't listen to it long enough to even begin to transcribe it. I haven't let anyone listen to it yet. All I know is that I've heard it before, and I now believe that it spoke when it was sitting in front of my husband. I don't remember hearing anything at the time, but for some reason the voice on the recorder immediately brings me back to that moment. The thoughts that must have gone through my daughter's head make me very upset. I've not seen the rake since he ruined my life, but I know that he's been in my room while I slept. I know, and I fear that one night I'll wake up to see him staring at me. I first met in person with Mary E. on the summer of 2007. I had arranged with her husband of 15 years, Terrence, to see her for an interview. Mary had initially agreed, since I was not a newsman but rather an amateur writer gathering information for a few early college assignments and, if all went according to plan, some pieces of fiction. We scheduled the interview for a particular weekend when I was in Chicago on unrelated business, but at the last moment, Mary changed her mind and locked herself in the couple's bedroom, refusing to meet with me. For half an hour, I sat with Terrence as we camped outside the bedroom door. I listened, and taking notes while he attempted to fruitlessly calm his wife. The things Mary said made little sense, but fit the pattern I was expecting. Though I could not see her, I could tell from her voice that she was crying. And more often than not, her objections to speak with me centered around an incoherent diatribe on her dreams, her nightmares. Terrence apologized profusely when we ceased the exercise, and I did my best to take it in stride. Recalled that I wasn't a reporter in search of a story, but merely a curious young man in search of information. Besides, I thought at the time I could perhaps find another, similar case if I put my mind and resources to it. Mary E. was the syslabus of a small Chicago-based bulletin board system in 1992 when she first entered Chicago-based bulletin board system in 1992 when she first encountered Smile.jpg, and her life changed forever. She and Terrence had been married for only 5 months. Mary was one of an estimated 400 people who saw the image, and it was posted on a hyperlinks in the BBS, though she was the only one who had spoken openly about the experience. The rest have remained anonymous, or perhaps dead. In 2005, when I was only in the 10th grade, Smile.jpg was first brought to my attention by my beginning interest in web-based phenomena. Mary was the only often cited victim of what is sometimes referred to as Smile.dog, the being Smile.jpg is reputed to display. What caught my interest, other than the obvious macabre elements of the cyber legend and my proclivity towards such things, was the sheer lack of information, usually to the point that people don't believe it even existed, other than a rumor or a hoax. It is unique because, though the entire phenomena centers around a picture file, the file is nowhere to be found on the internet. Certainly many photo-manipulated simulacra litter the web, showing up with the most frequency on sites such as the image board 4chan, particularly the X-focused paranormal subboard. It is suspected that these are fakes because they do not have the effect the true smile.jpg is believed to have, namely sudden onset temporal lobe epilepsy and acute anxiety. This purported reaction in the viewer is one of the reasons the phantom-like smile.jpg is referred with such disdain, since it is patently absurd, though, depending on whom you ask, the reluctance to acknowledge smile.jpg's existence might be just as much out of fear as it is out of disbelief. Neither smile.jpg nor smile.dog is mentioned anywhere on Wikipedia, though the website features articles on such other, perhaps more scandalous shock sites as hello.jpg or Two Girls, One Cup. Any attempt to create a page pertaining to smile.jpg is summarily deleted by any of the encyclopedia's many admins. Encounters with smile.jpg are stuff of internet legends. Mary E.'s story is not unique. There are unverified rumors of smile.jpg showing up on the early days of Usenet, and even one precedent tale that is in 2002, a hacker flooded the forums of a humor and satire website, Something Awful, with a deluge of smile.dog pictures, rendering almost half the forum's users at the time epileptic. It's also said that the mid-late 90s, the smile.jpg circulated on the Usenet as an attach of a chain email with the subject line, "Smile, God loves you." Yet despite the huge exposure these stunts would generate, there are very few people who admit to having experienced any of them, and no trace of the file or any link that's ever been discovered. Those who claim to have seen smile.jpg often weakly joke that they were far too busy to save a copy of the picture to their hard drives. However, all alleged victims offer the same description of a photo. A dog-like creature, usually described as appearing similar to a Siberian husky, illuminated by the flash of a camera, sits in a dimly lit room. The only background detail is a visible human hand extending from the darkest corner of the left side of the frame. The hand is empty, but usually described as beckoning. Of course, most attention is given to the dog, or dog creature, as some victims are more certain than others about what they are claiming to see. The muzzle of the beast is reputedly split in a wide grin, revealing 2 rows of very white teeth, very white, very straight, very sharp, very human-looking teeth. This is, of course, not a description given immediately after viewing the picture, but rather a recollection of the victims, who claim to have seen the picture endlessly repeated in their mind's eye during the time that they are, in reality, having epileptic fits. These fits are reported to continue indeterminably, often while the victim sleeps, resulting in very vivid and very disturbing nightmares. These may be treated with medication, though in some instances it is more effective than others. Mary E., I assume, was not on effective medication. That is why, after my visit to her apartment in 2007, I sent out feelers to several folklore and urban legend-oriented news groups, websites, and mailing lists, hoping to find the name of a supposed victim of smile.jpg who felt more interested in talking about his experiences. For a time, nothing happened, and at length I forgot completely about my pursuit. Since I had begun my freshman year of college and was quite busy, Mary contacted me via email, however, near the beginning of March 2008.
Dear Mr. L, I'm incredibly sorry about my behavior last summer when you came to interview me. I hope you understand that it was no fault of yours, but rather my own problems that led me to act out as I did. I realized I could have handled the situation more decorously. However, I hope you will forgive me. At the time, I was afraid. You see, for 15 years I've been haunted by smile.jpg. Smile.dog comes to me in my sleep every night. I know that sounds silly, but it's true. There is an ineffable quality about my dreams, my nightmares, that makes it completely unlike any real dreams I have ever had. I do not move and do not speak. I simply look ahead, and the only thing that's ahead of me is the scene from that horrible picture. I see the beckoning hand, and I see the smile.dog. It talks to me. It's not a dog, of course. I'm not quite sure really what it is. It tells me that it'll leave me alone, if only if I do what it asks. All I must do, it says, is spread the word. That's how it phrases its demands, and I know exactly what it means. It wants me to show it to someone else. And I could. The week after my incident, I received in the mail a manila envelope with no return address. Inside was only a 3.5-inch floppy diskette. Without having to check, I knew precisely what was on it. I thought for a long time about my options. I could show it to a stranger, a co-worker. I could even show it to Terrence, as much as the idea disgusted me. And what would happen then? Well, the smile.dog kept its word. I could sleep. Yet, if it lied, what would I do? And who is to say something worse would not come for me if I did as the creature asked? So I did nothing for 15 years, though I kept the diskette hidden amongst my things. Every night for 15 years, Smile.dog has come to me in my sleep and demanded that I spread the word. For 15 years I've stood strong, though there have been hard times. Many of my fellow victims on the BBS board, when I first encountered Smile.jpg, stopped posting. I heard some of them committed suicide. Others remained completely silent, simply disappearing off the face of the web. They're the ones I worry about the most. I sincerely hope you forgive me, Mr. L. The last summer when you contacted me and my husband about an interview, I was near the breaking point. I decided I was going to give you the floppy diskette. I did not care if Smile.dog was lying or not. I wanted it to end. You are a stranger, someone I had no connection with, and I thought you would not feel sorrow when you took the diskette as part of your research and sealed your fate. Before you arrived, I realized what I was doing. I was plotting to ruin your life. I could not stand the thought. In fact, I still cannot. I am ashamed, Mr. L, and I hope that this warning will dissuade you from further investigation of Smile.jpg. You may in time encounter someone who is, if not weaker than I, then wholly more depraved, someone who will not hesitate to follow Smile.dog's orders. Stop while you're still whole. Sincerely, Mary E.
Terrence contacted me later that month with news that his wife had killed herself. While cleaning up the various things she'd left behind, closing email accounts and the like, he happened upon the above message. He was a man in shambles. He wept as he told me that he listened to his wife's advice. He'd found the diskette, he revealed, and burned it until it was nothing but a stinking pile of blackened plastic. The part that most disturbed him, however, was how the diskette had hissed while it melted. Like some sort of animal, he said. I will admit that I was a little uncertain about how to respond to this. At first I thought it was a joke, with the couple belatedly playing with the situation in order to get a rise out of me. A quick check of several Chicago newspapers' online obituaries, however, proved that Mary E. was indeed dead. There was, of course, no mention of suicide in the article. I decided that, for a time at least, I would no longer pursue the subject of Smile.jpg, especially since I had finals coming up at the end of May. But the world has odd ways of testing us. Almost a full year after I'd returned from my disastrous interview with Mary E., I received another email.
Hello, I found your email through a mailing list. Your profile said you were interested in Smile.dog. I have saw it, and it is not as bad as everyone says. I have sent it to you, just spreading the word. Smiley face.
The final line chilled me to the bone. According to my email client, there was one file attached, called naturally Smile.jpg. I considered downloading it for some time. It was most likely a fake, I imagined, and even if it wasn't, I was never wholly convinced of Smile.jpg's particular powers. Mary E.'s account had shaken me, yes, but she was probably mentally unbalanced anyway. After all, how could a simple image do what Smile.jpg was said to accomplish? What sort of creature was it that could break one's mind with only the power of the eye? And even if such things were patently absurd, then why did legends even exist at all? If I downloaded the image, if I looked at it, and if Mary E. turned out to be correct, if Smile.dog came to me in my dreams demanding I spread the word, what would I do? Would I live my life as Mary had, fighting against the urge to give in until I died, or would I simply spread the word, eager to be put to rest? If I chose the latter route, how could I do it? Whom would I burden in? If I went through with my earlier intention to write a short article about Smile.jpg, I decided I could attach it as evidence. And anyone who read the article, anyone who took interest, would be affected. And even assuming the Smile.jpg attached to the email was genuine, would I be capricious enough to save myself in that manner? Could I spread the word? Yes. Yes, I could.
Frank, Thomas, and Kirby entered the office break room at approximately 12:25 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. Each man holds various containers designed for holding food and drink, and as they lazily slump into their fiberglass chairs that were haphazardly pushed under the table after their previous uses, the room echoes of violent thwop pops and elongated scraw jips as Tupperware lids fly open and Velcro bags release their treasures. God damn it! Thomas rolls his eyes. Frank, with a mouthful of cold pizza, murmurs in empathy. Wife packed your tuna salad again? Thomas tossed the soggy sandwich down onto the table with a resounding glop. She knows I hate this stuff, I swear! I've almost reached my breaking point with this shit. Why don't you just pack your own lunch? Kirby attempts to speak through teeth caked with salad. A drip of ranch dressing falling from Kirby's lips and collides with the table. Thomas just glares at Kirby with disdain. You don't get it, man. I've told her like 50 times. I don't like tuna salad. But does she listen? No. Thomas raises his right hand to his forehead. I swear I'm up to here with this. Well, at least you're not like that one guy. Frank wipes his mouth of the residual pepperoni grease with a cheap paper napkin. What one guy? Thomas looks at Frank in slight confusion. You know, about that guy from, CompuTools? I heard about him on the news last week. Kirby chimes in. He has already begun digging into his pudding cup. Thomas spins around to Kirby. What the hell are you guys talking about? Frank wipes off his hands with another napkin, folds his hands in front of him, and leans in quietly. Thomas and Kirby follow suit. You see, there was this guy over at CompuTools. Nice guy, I hear. What was his name? Frank concentrates on the ceiling, searching for a name, and suddenly Frank snaps his fingers. Phil Curbson. Anyway, he was one of those diligent workers, never complained, always got his work done before deadline. Hell, he would even stay late to make sure that his perfect record was never tarnished. Thomas chimes in. Ugh, I hate those guys. Well, supposedly, CompuTools hires this new hotshot manager, basic ROTC'd up from corporate, you know? Never lifted a finger in his life and got to skip right to the front. Thomas shook his head. Exactly. So this guy was brought in to, Frank raised his finger quotations, help. And since this douche really didn't know anything about CompuTool products, he would just bark orders and micromanage everyone. Everyone in the office was buzzing. We're gonna quit. Let's get HR involved. This guy is completely heartless. The usual empty water cooler promises. Everyone was in a tiff, except Phil. Phil would mind his own business and do his work with a silent smile. He would even go as far as asking his new manager, anything else I can do to help? Well, I don't know if this manager deliberately planned to be this malicious or if it was just common nature for him, but he got this notion in his head to see how far he could bend Phil until he broke. Starting the very next day, the manager threw the biggest workflow onto Phil's desk and barked out, "I need this done by 5 o'clock today or you can just pack your shit now," or, something to that effect. Phil quietly turned to face the manager, smiled his calm, innocent smile and said, "Sure thing, boss." 5 o'clock rolls around and Phil walks into the manager's office and proudly places the complete report onto the man's desk. "Here you go, boss." The manager looked up from polishing and buffing his prized 600-pound marble desk to the complete pile of papers with a look of complete shock. How could one man complete that report in only 7.5 short hours? His eyes then shifted from the report to glare viciously to look upon Phil's calm, lucid face. "Anything else I can do to help?" smiled Phil. And the manager simply shook his head in disbelief. "Okay, well, I'm going to head out for the day, sir. You have yourself a great evening." The manager was flabbergasted. He steeled his motives and vowed that he would try harder to break this man's spirit by the end of the week. Well, the end of the week came and went, and still Phil was as cheerful as ever. Always responded to every outrageous task with a happy, "Sure thing," and then turning in the completed work to the manager at the end of the day with a pleasant, "Anything else I can do to help?" Well, this went on for a few weeks, and the manager, now seeing the current efforts were fruitless, now decided that maybe he needed to up the ante. The manager would now bombard Phil with major accounts and lengthy business trips and tedious conferences, all to quell his passion that Phil must be broken. But with every new and more difficult task, Phil would embrace it with a "Sure thing, boss," and come back for more with a sunny "Anything else I can do to help?" The manager, now at his wit's end, had one more trick up his sleeve. Although his lack of concentration on the job that he was hired for was beginning to come under fire, he wanted to give it one more shot before he himself had to face the firing squad. He got it in his head that it was the breaks in between each 8-hour day that was allowing Phil to wind down, regain his bearings, get a good night's sleep, and come back in the next day, ready for more. So with that in mind, he gave Phil the budget report for the following year and told him, "I don't care how long it takes, but you cannot leave your desk until we trim at least $5 million off the next year's budget." As always, Phil replied with his trademark, "Sure thing, boss." And the manager turned away knowing that this task would be Phil's breaking point. And like clockwork, Phil came into the manager's office with the complete budget and handed it to him. "Anything else I can do to help?" The manager looked over the budget. I really don't like these numbers." The manager threw the report back at Phil. "Do it all over, and this time, do it right." Phil's smile sagged a little, but soon rebounded and turned around and headed back to his desk. The manager saw Phil's smile buckle for just a moment, and he chuckled to himself that his plan is finally working. 8 o'clock rolls around, and Phil returns back to the manager's office, but Phil looks a bit different. His hair a bit disheveled. His horn-rimmed glasses are now on his forehead. One corner of his shirt has been untucked from his pants. Phil's stride isn't as carefree. Phil hands the report to the manager and exasperatedly utters, "Anything else I can do to help, sir?" The manager, now seeing victory close at hand, looks at the report. Phil, I think you made some miscalculations here." The manager hands the report back to him. "Do it again. And remember what I said. You stay until it's complete." Phil, dejected, defeated, disappointed, looks at the report in his hand, wipes the sweat from his brow, scratches the back of his neck. the nearly broken man walked back to his desk to correct the errors. And as soon as Phil left his office, the manager closed the door and danced a twisted victory dance. Phil was nearly gone. The manager was going to sleep good that night. At 11 o'clock, Phil trudged back into the manager's office and handed him the completed and corrected report. Exhausted, Phil asked, "Is there anything else I can do to help, sir?" The manager, now a shining example of pure arrogance, threw the report on the floor and exclaimed, "Why did you do the budget for next year? I asked you to do the budget for this year. Can't you even follow simple instructions? I want you to march back to your pathetic little cube, and you are going to stay all night if you have to until you do exactly what I asked you to do, or so help me God, I will find someone else who can do it." Now, no one knows exactly what happened next. But some of the late-night stragglers who heard the manager's tirade claimed that as soon as he was finished, Phil took off his glasses, cleaned them off with a corner of his shirt that was still untucked, put his glasses back on, and closed all the blinds in the manager's office that faced the rest of the room. What came from the room after that was a thunderous crash and a high-pitched shriek. The door flew open, and the manager bolted out of the room with glass shards in his hair, bleeding profusely from his face, screaming, "Call security! Call security!" Witnesses then claimed that they saw Phil calmly walk out of the office, blood splattered about his shirt and hands. He held a letter opener in his right hand, now stained with blood. Phil's calm and happy expression was lost in a visage one person could only describe as berserk, and Phil's brow furrowed, scrunching his eyebrows into a wide arch, his teeth gnarled, and according to one person, appeared sharp and pointed. His skin, once pale and fair, now red and scaly. His slick hair now flailed wildly about his head and danced of its own accord. Phil marched towards the cowering manager. "Sure thing. Sure thing. Sure thing." Phil continued to chant these two words over and over, and the volume of his voice continued to climb until he was shrieking. Phil destroyed everything in his path to get to the manager, who was now scrambling for the elevator. He turned over cubicle walls, hurled the office printer, overturned desks, but was still marching at a steady pace. Not once did Phil's gait increase in speed. The elevator's door finally opened, and the manager quickly darted inside, and as he was frantically pounding on the door close button, Phil's arm thrust inside the cabin as the doors were closing. The manager let out a girly cry for help, and then Thomas, now sitting on the edge of his seat, blinked. "Yeah?" "Well," Frank continued, "security hauled him away. The folks that stuck around for the whole ordeal say that they've never heard Phil use any profanity ever, but that one day they heard curse words so vile that they almost sounded like they were in some form of ancient tongue, some demonic language. Only by the grace of God was security able to restrain Phil. As the paddy wagon rolled up to the office building drive, witnesses noticed three things. First, that Phil was kicking and screaming the entire time and was hardly recognizable. Second, that the manager couldn't stop crying. And thirdly, and the most bizarre, was they realized what made the thunderous crash in the manager's office. The 600-pound marble desk, the manager's prized possession, was now lying in pieces outside the office window. So that's it. What happened after that? There had to have been a trial, Thomas exclaimed. Oh, there was a trial, but Phil was deemed mentally unstable to serve trial, so he was committed to the state hospital over in Brooksfield. And everything died down and returned to normal. The manager was brought in to see corporate and was actually let go because not only did the security cameras record what Phil did to the manager in the office, but they also recorded the manager's outburst on Phil that caused him to snap in the first place. "Just desserts, I say," Thomas commented. Kirby just shook his head as he started to clean up the empty containers. "Well, here's the real punchline. And this I got from Sally Boyd over there at CompuTools. She used to be the manager's admin. After the manager was let go, he was cleaning out his temporary desk, and to pass the time he had the radio on. The manager left his office for a moment to get some more boxes, and as he returned back to his office, she heard on the radio announcement that Phil Curbson, committed to Brookfield State Hospital on Monday, was discovered missing from his cell earlier today. The manager froze in horror. And as Sally turned around to see the manager's expression, the door violently slammed in her face, knocking her backwards onto the ground. As she recovered from her fall, she told me that she could clearly hear the manager's pleading for his life. She distinctly heard, "Please don't do it. Do anything you want." And then a familiar, calm, and soothing voice came from behind the door. "Anything I can do to help, sir." Sally pounced for the door, but it was locked. She tried to look through the window, but the blinds were mostly drawn, so she could only see flailing arms and legs. Sally kicked at the door repeatedly and shouted, "Somebody please help me!" But it was too late. As soon as the commotion ceased from inside the office, Sally heard the knob click to signal that it had been unlocked, and with tears in her eyes, she slowly reached for the knob and opened the door to reveal a gruesome scene. The manager, splayed open from his throat to his pelvis, rib cage and organs exposed, his hands twisted into contorted knots of flesh and knuckle. His face warped into an expression of unrelenting anguish and fear, eyes wide, jaw locked, nose broken and twisted, and in his left hand, its last incandescence drawing to a close, was the manager's own heart. Sally and some of the onlookers, who had finally gained access to the room, then looked up to see the following message scrawled on the bare, dingy yellow office wall. "We were wrong. He had a heart after all." Jesus! Thomas had to hold back vomit by covering his mouth. After that, CompuTool shut down that office. I think they turned it into a megabyte. Yeah. Frank finished his tale with a solemn sip of coffee. Thomas rubbed his eyes. Whoa, wait a minute. Whatever happened to Phil? This is when I'm supposed to say, that's the strange thing, but it's really not that strange. When they finally opened up the office, the only person in there was the manager. Sally even said that she never actually saw Phil. She only heard his voice, or at least what sounded like his voice, and he hasn't been seen since. "That story is complete bullshit," Kirby exclaimed. Frank and Thomas spun around to glare at Kirby for breaking the mood. "What?" Thomas inquired. "Like you know exactly what happened." "I know that's not how it happened," Kirby calmly stated as he adjusted his horn-rimmed glasses. "Okay, hotshot. How do you know?" Frank jested. "Because." Kirby leaned in close. Frank and Thomas matched Kirby's movements. "The hospital doesn't know I'm gone yet." Just then, Kirby's manager leaned into the break room. "Hey, Kirb, I need you to do something for me." "Sure thing, boss." As Kirby stands up to leave the now-still break room, Frank and Thomas glance down at Kirby's security badge for his full name. Kirby Phillips.
So last year I spent 6 months participating in what I was told was a psychological experiment. I found an ad in my local paper looking for imaginative people looking to make good money, and since it was the only ad that week that I was remotely qualified for, I gave them a call. We arranged an interview. They told me that all I would have to do is stay in a room, alone, with sensors attached to my head to read my brain activity, and while I was there, I would visualize a double of myself. They called it my tulpa. It seemed easy enough, and I agreed to do it as soon as they told me how much I would be paid. And the next day I began. Then they attached sensors to my head and hooked them into a little black box on the table beside me. They talked me through the process of visualizing my double again, and explained that if I got bored or restless, instead of moving around, I should visualize my double moving around or try to interact with him, and so on. The idea was to keep him with me the entire time I was in the room. I had trouble with it for the first few days. It was more controlled than any sort of daydreaming I'd done before. I'd imagine my double for a few minutes, then get distracted. But by the fourth day, I could manage to keep him present for the entire 6 hours. They told me I was doing very well. The second week, they gave me a different room, with wall-mounted speakers. They told me that they wanted to see if I could still keep the tulpa with me in spite of distracting stimuli. The music was discordant, ugly, and I suppose unsettling. It made the process a little more difficult, but I managed nonetheless. The next week they played even more unsettling music, punctuated with shrieks and feedback loops, what sounded like an old-school dial-up modem, and guttling voices speaking some foreign language. I just laughed it off. I was a pro by then. After about a month, I started to get bored. To liven things up, I started interacting with my doppelganger. We'd have conversations or play rock, paper, scissors, or I'd imagine him juggling or breakdancing or whatever caught my fancy. I asked the researchers if my foolishness would adversely affect their study, but they encouraged me. So we played and communicated, and that was fun for a while. And then it got a little strange. I was telling him about my first date one day, and he corrected me. I'd said my date was wearing a yellow top, and he told me it was a green one. I thought about it for a second, and realized that he was right. It creeped me out. After my shift that day, I talked to the researchers about it. "You're using the thought form to access your subconscious," they explained. "You knew on some level that you were wrong, and you subconsciously corrected yourself." What had been creepy was suddenly really cool. I was talking to my subconscious. It took some practice, but I found that I could question my tulpa and access all sorts of memories. I could make it quote whole pages of books I'd read once, years before, or things I was taught and immediately forgot in high school. It was awesome. That was around the time I started calling up my double outside the research center. Not often at first, but I was so used to imagining him by now that it almost seemed odd not to see him. So whenever I was bored, I'd visualize my double. It was amusing to take him along like an invisible friend. I imagined him while I was hanging out with friends or visiting my mom. I even brought him along on a date once. I didn't need to speak aloud to him, so I was able to carry out conversations with him and no one was the wiser. I know that sounds strange, but it was fun. Not only was he a walking repository of everything that I knew and everything I had forgotten, he also seemed more in touch with me than I even did at times. He had an uncanny grasp of the minutity of body language that I didn't even realize I was picking up on. For example, I thought the date I brought him along on was going incredibly badly. He pointed out how she was laughing a little too hard at my jokes and leaning towards me as I spoke, and a bunch of other subtle clues I wasn't consciously picking up on. I listened, and let's just say the date went very well. By the time I'd been at the research center for 4 months, he was with me constantly. The researchers approached me one day after my shift and asked if I had stopped visualizing him. I denied it, and they seemed pleased. I silently asked my double if he knew what prompted that. He just shrugged it off. And so did I. I withdrew a little from the world at that point. I was having trouble relating to people. It seemed that they were so confused and so unsure of themselves, while I had a manifestation of myself to confer with. It made socializing awkward. Nobody else seemed aware of the reasons behind their actions, why some things made them mad and others made them laugh. They didn't know what moved them, but I did, or at least I could ask myself and get an answer. A friend confronted me one evening, pounded at the door until I answered, and came in fuming and swearing up a storm. "You haven't answered when I called in fucking weeks, you dick," he yelled. "What's your fucking problem?" I was about to apologize to him, and it probably would have offered to hit the bars with him that night, but my tulpa grew suddenly furious. "Hit him," it said. Before I knew what was going on, I did. I heard his nose break. He fell to the floor and came up swinging, and we beat each other up and down my apartment. I was more furious than I'd ever been. And I was not merciful. I knocked him to the ground and gave him 2 savage kicks to the ribs. And that was when he fled, hunched over and sobbing. The police were by a few minutes later, but I told him that he'd been the instigator, and since he wasn't around to refute me, they let me off with a warning. My Tulpa was grinning the entire time. We spent the night crowing about my victory and sneering over how badly I'd beaten my friend. And it wasn't until the next morning when I was checking out my black eye and cut lip in the mirror that I remembered what had set me off. My double was the one who'd grown furious, not me. I'd been feeling guilty and a little ashamed, but he'd goaded me into a vicious fight with a concerned friend. He was present, of course, and knew my thoughts. You don't need him anymore. You don't need anyone else, he told me. And I felt my skin crawl. I explained all this to the researchers who employed me, but they just laughed it off. You can't be scared of something that you're imagining, one told me. My double stood beside him and nodded his head, and then smirked at me. I tried to take their words to heart, but over the next few days I found myself growing more and more anxious about my Tulpa. It seemed that he was changing. He looked taller, more menacing. His eyes twinkled with mischief, and I saw malice in his constant smile. No job was worth losing my mind over, I decided. If he was out of control, I'd put him down. I was so used to him at that point that visualizing him was an automatic process, so I started trying my damnedest not to visualize him. It took a few days, but it started to work, somewhat. I could get rid of him for hours at a time, but every time he came back, he seemed worse. His skin seemed ashen, his teeth more pointed, he hissed and gibbered and threatened and swore. The disconcerted music that I'd been listening to for months seemed to accompany him everywhere. Even when I was at home, I'd relax and slip up, no longer concentrating on not seeing him, and there he'd be, that howling noise with him. I was still visiting the research center and spending my 6 hours there. I needed the money, and I thought they weren't aware that I was now not actively visualizing my Tulpa. I was wrong. After my shift one day, about 5.5 months in, 2 impressive men grabbed me and restrained me. Someone in a lab coat jabbed the hypodermic needle into me. I woke up in my stupor back in the room, strapped into the bed, music blaring with my doppelganger standing over me, cackling. He was hardly looking human anymore. His features were twisted. His eyes were sunken in their sockets and filmed over like a corpse. He was much taller than me, but hunched over. His hands were twisted. The fingernails were like talons. He was, in short, fucking terrifying. I tried to will him away, but I just couldn't seem to concentrate. He giggled and tapped the IV in my arm. I thrashed in my restraints as best I could, but could hardly move at all. They pumped you full of the good shit. How's the mind? All fuzzy? He leaned closer, and closer as he spoke. I gagged. His breath smelled like spoiled meat. I tried to focus, but I couldn't banish him. The next few weeks were terrible. Every so often, someone in a doctor's coat would come in and inject me with something, or force-feed me a pill. They kept me dizzy and unfocused, sometimes left me hallucinating or delusional. My thought form was still present, constantly mocking me. He interacted with me, or perhaps caused my delusions. I hallucinated that my mother was there, scolding me. And then he'd cut her throat and her blood showered me. It was so real I could taste it. The doctors never spoke to me. I begged at times, screamed, hurled incentives, demanded answers. They never spoke to me. They may have talked to my Tulpa, My personal monster. I'm not sure. I was so doped up and confused that it may have just been more delusions, but I remember them talking with him. I grew convinced that he was the real one, and I was the thought form. He encouraged that line of thought at times, and mocked me at others. Another thing that I pray was delusion. He could touch me. More than that, he could hurt me. He'd poke and prod at me if he felt I wasn't paying enough attention to him. Once he grabbed my testicles and squeezed until I told him that. Another time, he slashed my forearm with one of his talons. I still have a scar. Most days I can convince myself that I injured myself and just hallucinated that he was responsible. Most days. Then one day, while he was telling me a story about how he was going to gut everyone I loved, starting with my sister, he paused. A look crossed his face, and reached out and touched my head like my mother used to when I was feverish. He stayed still for a long moment, and then smiled. All thoughts are creative, he told me. Then he walked out the door. 3 hours later, I was given an injection and passed out. I awoke unrestrained. Shaking, I made my way to the door, and I found it unlocked. I walked out into the empty hallway and then ran. I stumbled more than once, but I made it down the stairs, out into the lot behind the building. There I collapsed, weeping like a child. I knew I had to keep moving, but I couldn't manage it. I got home eventually. I don't remember how. I locked the door, shoved a dresser against it, and took a long shower. Slept for a day and a half. No one came looking for me that night. No one came the next day, or the one after that. It was over. I'd spent a week locked in that room, but it felt like a century. I'd withdrawn so much from my life beforehand that nobody had even known I was missing. The police didn't find anything. The research center was empty when they searched it. The paper trail fell apart. The names I'd given them were aliases. Even the money I'd received was apparently untraceable. I recovered as much as one can. I don't leave the house much, and I have panic attacks when I do. I cry a lot. I don't sleep much, and my nightmares are terrible. It's over, I tell myself. I survived. I use the concentration those bastards taught me to convince myself, and it works sometimes. Not today, though. 3 days ago, I got a phone call from my mother. There's been a tragedy. My sister's the latest victim in a spree of killings, the police say. The perpetrator mugs his victims, then guts them. The funeral was this afternoon. It was as lovely a ceremony as a funeral can be, I suppose. I was a little distracted, though. All I could hear was the music coming from somewhere distant. Discordant. Unsettling stuff that sounds like feedback. And shrieking. And a modem dialing up. I hear it still. A little louder now.
Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and before we say goodnight, I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching tonight's video, or for listening to tonight's episode of the podcast. I also want to say if you guys like the stories you're hearing now, please check out the Creepypasta Collection Volume 1 and Volume 2. They're available now on Amazon, they're available at Barnes & Noble, they're available wherever you like to get books. They're some of the best authors I've worked with over the years, some of my absolute favorite authors, and some of my friends. So I'd appreciate it if you guys check those things out. There's also an audiobook that I wasn't involved with. I don't know why Simon & Schuster did that, but they did. So you can check that out too, if you'd like listening to books, but you just don't want to hear me. As always, I want to give a very big thank you to everybody who supports me on Patreon, patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta. People such as Diana Kraus, AcidSystem, Benjamin 2003, Blake Rattler, Bottle Coolin, Brandon Mendoza, Caltuna, CoryxKenshin, Dakota Best, Daniel Poulsen, Dante Kinkade, Enchanted Buns, Eric Anthony Caruso, Estebean, 15 Squirrels in a Trench Coat, Galaxy Gremlin, Hayes Nephew, Himbo Jerry, Our Minute Second Time, Jay Kearns, Jedis Pet, Lou Cypher, Nick MC, Plant Piss, Red Shadowcat, Remember the Sun, Salty Surprise, Samara Lynn, Scary Stories Fuel Me 32, Seclude, Simba's Bloody Mojo, Sky Harbor, Smiley the Psychotic, Sully Man, Polly Sue, Team Leo 76, The Chavez Brothers, The Ginger Bros, Tommy Walters, Viceroy Scorn, William Wellington, X Reaper 69, XX Lucky Cat XX, Zibold, Shadow Gardens, and Peaceful Buddha. Thank you all so much for being here. And as always, sweet dreams.